Chapter 992. The person in the God-confining gorge had purposely failed. When the Eastern Zhou clan came to this conclusion, their attention on this matter was raised to the highest. Find him in the shortest time possible, no matter the cost. As long as he is willing, he will be a follower. The will of the clan was passed to Eastern Zhou Jali. She stopped her secluded cultivation and tried to understand this matter. If she could find a sufficiently strong follower, it would be of great help to her when she entered the myriad soul path. Wasting some cultivation time was definitely worth it. Unfortunately, the Eastern Zhou clan had not been able to confirm the identity of the person in the God-confining gorge. Xiu just needs to focus on cultivating. I will do my best to follow up on this matter. Once there are any results, I will inform you immediately, Miracle Dr. Yi said with a solemn expression. He knew that there had always been voices in the clan that opposed Xiu. Those people did not want to see Xiu obtain such a strong follower. There would definitely be twists and turns in this matter. What he could do now was to help Xiu find this person and make him agree. Eastern Zhou Jolly nodded. Old Yi, I will have to trouble you with this matter. No matter what, I must obtain this person. He is extremely important to me. Yes, we cannot afford to provoke the God-confining gorge, nor can we afford to provoke the person inside. This conclusion made the experts of the Lung clan feel as if a large stone had been stuffed into their chests. Every time they breathed, they felt pain. To be able to easily solve the 99th question twice in a row, it was obvious that this person was not someone easy to deal with. How could such a person be an ordinary person who could be easily manipulated? All right, even if they took a step back and said that he really was an ordinary person, would he still be ordinary after this matter? What a joke. When this person left the God-confining gorge, his name would be known throughout the world. Who knew how many factions would throw olive branches at him? In comparison, the Lung clan was nothing. Thus, even if they could not bear the resentment in their chests, they could only forcefully swallow it. In the land of eternal darkness, the scarred and miserable-looking stone pagoda surface was extremely dim. It gave off a feeling of weakness, as if it could be extinguished at any moment. If rage could be expressed in numbers, then there would be a long string of 9999999 S above its head right now. It was only a hair's breadth away from blowing itself up. However, Shurta had managed to recognize reality with great difficulty. Even if he were to explode from anger, he would not be able to change anything. That Xing, he had already made up his mind to treat the process of the examination as the best opportunity for cultivation. He would walk down this path until the end. If it continued like this, once its energy was exhausted, it would once again fall into a deep slumber. It was unknown how many years it would take for it to wake up again, or never wake up again. The moment this thought appeared, the light on the surface of the stone tower flickered a few times, revealing a hint of fear. It had never hidden its fear of death, so it had been thinking of ways to increase its survivability since many years ago. Reality proved that its ulcer was absolutely correct, because after the calamity, it was the only one that survived. The longer one lived, the more one realized how terrifying death was. The stone tower didn't want to die. It wanted to live until the end of time without the slightest bit of loathing. Thus, after feeling the aura of annihilation, the stone tower became restless. But if it lowered its head on its own initiative, then the nature of the situation would change. It would no longer be Xing who passed the examination with great difficulty and became one of its candidates. Instead, it would become its master. This result was difficult for Shurta to accept, but as he said before, he was a fellow that feared death. So, in the face of death, if he couldn't accept it, then everything could be discussed. I have to lower my head? Do I really have to lower my head? Do I really have to lower my head to this Xiaxi? I'm not willing. Moreover, even if I lower my head, can he do it? If I fail, then I'll really be done for. The fourth cycle of fleecing, cough, that was a bit too excessive. This was the fourth time, Qin, you had tried to solve the problem of the rules. The camp was quiet. This was because besides him and Xiang Shui, everyone else had sent out distress signals to the outside world and used the sacrificial ritual to leave. They really couldn't stay here any longer. Otherwise, they were worried that their hearts would explode sooner or later. Even so, the name Qinyu would inevitably become a nightmare that shrouded them for the rest of their lives. They would never be able to escape. "I'm going out," Qinyu said. Then he pushed open the door and walked towards the red stone wall, his eyebrows gently furrowed. There was a dignified look in his eyes. The fourth time he tried to solve the problem, he could clearly feel that the difficulty of the problem of the rules had soared. It was as if some unknown existence was dissatisfied with his actions and thus increased the difficulty. Now, 14 days had passed, and he had only solved the 73rd problem. It seemed that things like fleecing wouldn't be so simple in the future. Moreover, there was a bit of urgency in Qinyu's heart. This was because everyone had left. If the Eastern Zhou clan collapsed before he left the god-confining gorge, then what would happen to the quota of followers? Thus, he began to think about whether or not he should leave. But once he left here, he feared he wouldn't be able to find this kind of cultivation treasure land again. He feared he would never have the chance to find this cultivation treasure land again. Thinking of this, Qinyu felt his heart ache. Watching Qinyu leave, Xiang Shui smiled. In this place, there was only her and Qinyu. If they could continue living like this, that wouldn't be too bad either. But she was well aware that it was impossible for Qinyu to stay here forever. She had no idea how many days like this would last. Xiang Shui took a deep breath and suppressed the sourness in her heart. One shouldn't think too much in life. If one could enjoy life, then why worry about the future? 5 days later, Qinyu solved the 90th problem. Another 5 days later, he reached the 98th problem. He took a deep breath and slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were bloodshot and his entire body exuded a deep sense of unity. Swish! Shaking off the dizziness in his mind, Qinyu turned and returned to his dwelling. This time he didn't cultivate. Instead, he fell onto his bed. The moment he touched the surface of the bed, he fell into a deep sleep. Xiang Shui covered him with a blanket. She stood at the bedside and looked at him. After hesitating for a long time, she gave up. In any case, there would be chances in the future. Since he was so strong right now, it was best not to squeeze out his seed to avoid an accident. As he fell into a deep sleep, Qinyu didn't know that he had escaped an incomparably erotic calamity. This sleep continued for 3 days and 3 nights. When he opened his eyes, a sharp light flashed in them. He had restored himself to his peak condition. His essence, energy, and divine were all at the peak. He lifted the blanket and got off the bed. Standing on the ground, he stretched his waist. After a series of crackling sounds, Qinyu slowly let out a breath of turbid air, his spirits rising. Now was the time. He reached out and pushed open the door. He didn't think that Xiang Shui would be sitting outside. As she saw him come out, her face lit up with joy. She curled her lips and said, "You slept for 3 days. Is your zodiac a pig?" Qinyu shook his head. This stubborn woman. Would it kill her to treat him a little better? However, there were still important matters to attend to today, so he wouldn't bother with her for now. "I'm going." After speaking, Qinyu paused for a moment. "If something abnormal happens later, don't be afraid." Xiang Shui's complexion changed. She thought for a moment and then followed behind. Standing in front of the red stone wall, Qinyu looked back at Xiang Shui. He didn't allow her to leave. He waved his hand and said, "Step back a little." After she reluctantly stepped back, his thoughts stirred and he triggered the red stone wall, opening the 99th question of the rules. Starting several days ago, strictly speaking, when he solved the 90th question, Qinyu had an intuition that the answers he solved this time would be different from before. But as for what exactly was different, he wasn't sure. After he solved the 98th question, he had slept for 3 days straight. Now that he had woken up, this intuition hadn't dissipated. Rather, it had become even stronger. It seemed that his continuous shearing had triggered some changes that he didn't know about. He didn't know whether this was good or bad. Looking at the red stone wall in front of him and the messy lines drawn out by the steel, Qin Yu's pupils shrank. If the 98th question had already made Qin Yu feel that it was ridiculously difficult, then this last question was more than 10 times harder than it had been before. Qin Yu subconsciously took several steps back. He looked at the red stone wall in front of him that was like a fountain, constantly spewing out messy lines. There were so many lines that they had to spread outwards in order to be able to fit. Gradually, the surface of the massive red stone wall in front of Qin Yu was covered by them. There were probably more than 1,000,000 of them. It was like an extremely precise and strict game of building blocks. He needed to use these millions of lines to construct a complete set of rules. Any mistake would lead to failure. If it was like before, he could directly give up and solve the question of the rules from the beginning. That would naturally be incomparably simple. No matter how difficult the question was, he didn't want to pass it. He could just casually fail. But this time, Qin Yu felt that if he were to carelessly fail again, there would be a problem, a major problem. Just as this thought emerged from the bottom of her heart, a weak voice that was suppressing its anger rang out in her mind. Xing, you're right. If you can't solve this problem today, then prepare to stay here forever. Don't be curious about who I am, and don't ask me why I am filled with resentment. All you need to know is that since I have spoken, I will absolutely do it. Remember, you only have one day. Start now. If you fail, then you will suffer bad luck with me. I won't be able to run away, and you useless bastard. Don't even think about living a comfortable life. This is all because of you. This is all because of you. After speaking, the voice vanished from sight. Qin Yu frowned. He didn't know who this voice was, but he could feel the resentment coming from the depths of its heart, so thick that it nearly condensed into essence. The moment this voice fell, Qin Yu's heart skipped a beat. Within his soul's space, the power of sun and moon stirred up fluctuations. Then, Qin Yu realized that everything this voice said was true. This question of the rules in front of him was unimaginably complex. If he couldn't solve it, then he would be in deep trouble. Hum! With a loud ringing sound, an invisible strength descended from the void, covering the red stone wall and isolating Qin Yu from the outside world. But this time, this invisible strength wasn't simply protecting Qin Yu from outside disturbances. It faintly emitted the aura of a sealed valley, as if Qin Yu failed, this strength would immediately throw him into the abyss and turn him into an eternal prison, never to be opened again. Xiang Shui's complexion changed. Qin Yu. She could feel that something was wrong. In front of the red stone wall, Qin Yu took a deep breath. He turned to look at her and slowly said, "Don't worry, I can deal with it." However, he was smiling wryly in his heart. Although he didn't know what was going on, he had no idea. Although he didn't know what was going on, it seemed that everything that happened today was because of him. Could this be considered bringing this upon himself? Suppressing these thoughts, a dark golden light shined from deep within Qin Yu's eyes, falling onto the red stone wall. No matter what happened, it was impossible for him to be trapped by this question of the rules. In the hidden underground palace, between the interweaving array diagrams in the void, there was a sudden tremor. An unimaginably powerful aura was released, like an endless mountain range or a vast ocean, suppressing everyone within. The cultivators of the Lung clan who were maintaining the operation of the formation all froze on the spot, maintaining their previous movements. They were like fishes that were frozen in ice, unable to move an inch. However, the large eyeballs and the shocked emotions within them indicated that they were still alive and not just statues. The phantom of a stone pagoda, filled with the aura of time, slowly rose from the void. A deep and dignified voice sounded out, "Now, I need you to provide me with an even greater strength." One day later, the God-forbidding gorge that descended upon the world suddenly vanished from sight. No one knew just what had happened. Even the Lung family that was personally controlling this place had no clue as to what had happened. They didn't obtain any useful information. This caused those that were paying attention to reveal looks of disappointment. But they didn't stop here. Instead, they mobilized their tentacles to search for the mysterious cultivator called Chinyu in the God-forbidding gorge. That's right. As the people in the God-forbidding gorge left through sacrifices, Chinyu's name had spread throughout the world. At least 3 times in a row, he had solved the 99th question of the God-forbidding gorge and then failed on his own initiative. Just this point alone was enough to ignite the eyes of the world and draw in countless gazes. Many undercurrents surged beneath the calm lake. And now, the Chinyu that these undercurrents were pointing towards had fallen into a deep slumber. It had been a long, long time. The old horse and the lame horse pulled the carriage. Xiang Shui turned her head from time to look at the unconscious Chinyu, a light in her eyes. This was already the 16th day since Chinyu had fallen into a deep slumber. She didn't know what had happened, but it was clear that it was related to the last question of the rules that flooded the entire red stone wall. After Chinyu solved it, a rune condensed. But this rune didn't shatter like before. Rather, it flew out and fused into his body. Then the red stone wall shattered. Chinyu, and the 2 horses were wrapped up by an invisible strength and teleported away. Afterwards, Chinyu didn't wake up again. Even though his aura was vibrant and his soul fluctuations were stable, Xiang Shui was still worried that he hadn't woken up for 16 days. If something really happened to Chinyu, she really didn't know what she would do in this strange world. As she pondered these matters, she unconsciously fell into a trance. It was only when she heard a shout in her ears that she discovered several cultivators had appeared in front of her. What a beautiful ice fox! Looking at how clean its fur is, its bloodline must be very pure. The woman who spoke was petite, but because her proportions were too good, she gave off a slender and curvaceous feeling. It was a very eye-catching sight. Xiang Shui frowned. Her heart sank. Her intuition told her that these people represented trouble. Zhenjiangxiu has good eyesight. This is indeed an ice fox with a pure bloodline. I fear there are very few of them left in this world. To meet it today is Zhenjiangxiu's good fortune. This is also the good fortune of this ice fox. I will give it to Xiu. A person smiled and said. His eyes fell on Xiang Shui and paused for a moment, a hint of surprise in them. Although he hid it well, he still wasn't able to avoid Zhenjiangxiu's cold eyes. Humph! Men really weren't anything good. A maid that drove a cart actually had such a charming, fox-like face. It was really displeasing to the eye. It would be best if it was scratched. Zhenjiangxiu's eyes flashed. She regretfully said, I don't want it. Such a beautiful ice fox must be someone's beloved object. How could I steal it away? Another man sneered. To give this ice fox to Zhenjiangxiu is her good fortune. Do you think she would dare to be dissatisfied with this? He waved his hand. Go. Bring the ice fox to Zhenjiangxiu. Whoosh! With the sound of breaking air, a cold-faced cultivator landed in front of the carriage. He swept his eyes over the old and lame horses and frowned. He slowly said, Give me the ice fox, and you may leave. Xiang Shui reached out a hand and took the ice fox off her shoulder. I'll give it to you. The cold-faced cultivator didn't think things would be so simple. He looked at her deeply before taking the ice fox and walking away. Xiang Shui picked up her whip and struck the shaft of the carriage. The old and lame horses spun around and began to pull the carriage around the people in front of them. Shang Junjun held onto the ice fox, a bright smile on her face. Thank you, Brother Yin. I like this ice fox very much, and I can't wait to bond with it. I don't even want to continue walking. Fan Bo was annoyed that Yun Zhan had taken the first step. Now that he heard this, he immediately said, If Zhenjiangxiu doesn't want to walk, she can take the carriage. Hurry up and stop and give us the carriage. Xiang Shui frowned. You said just now that we would leave after handing over the icebox. Fan Bo impatiently sneered. You can still leave now, but if you continue talking, that might not be the case. Chapter 993. Xiang Shui pursed her lips. Fine. Just as the words left his mouth, he was interrupted. A slightly helpless and somewhat amused voice came from the carriage. When did you become so easily bullied? This is the first time I've seen one. Xiang Shui's tensed body relaxed. She immediately turned her head and gritted her teeth. It's all because of you, the Zodiac, sleeping until now. Otherwise, why would I feel so wronged? Her tone was vicious, but the joy in her eyes still warmed Qin Yu's heart. He never thought that solving the last question of the rules would cause him to consume so much energy. He had lasted until the moment he solved the question and then fainted. If it wasn't for Xiang Shui, during this period of time, he didn't have the strength to resist, and who knew what kind of outcome he would have. Qin Yu smiled and pushed open the door. He jumped off the carriage and said, Don't worry, I will help you vent your anger now. Although the young men and women in the lead were unbridled and overbearing, most of them came from extraordinary backgrounds. The environment that they grew up in determined that they had good eyesight. Naturally, they could see that as the man in the carriage spoke, Xiang Shui suddenly relaxed. It seemed that after he woke up, all the problems would no longer be a problem. But why? Are we so easy to deal with in your eyes? He, and he was relying on a junior who was not even at the divine realm. How ridiculous. He still wants to vent his anger? How do you want to vent your anger? Smash your head against the ground. Rub your face against it and make us laugh to death? Shang Junjun lowered her eyelids, revealing a look of fear. Let's not. He's already angry. I'll return the ice box. Let's not have a conflict. These words were simply intolerable, even though they knew very well that Shang Junjun's current behavior was 99% an act for them to see. The key point was that since they wanted to pursue Shang Junjun and climb up her clan brother's coattails, even if they were dissatisfied with being used like fools, they still had to put on a positive attitude of being willing to do anything for Miss Junjun. Yunjian and Fanbo's behavior could be said to be like teaching a lesson. Their faces were filled with rage, and their eyes were filled with expressions that said, You don't know what's good for you. You dare to make Miss Junjun feel uneasy. You deserve to die 10,000 times over. Kid, you should be clear about the principle of enduring for a while to be calm, right? Being able to live is something worth cherishing. You should think this through, said Fanbo coolly. Every word he said was filled with condescension. Previously, Yunjian had already fallen behind a little. Now he naturally had to put in more effort to get back Miss Junjun's attention. Why waste time with them? Since they dared to speak rudely to Miss Junjun, they naturally deserved to be punished. He sneered and waved his hand. Go! Capture this brat and hand him over to Miss Junjun. In today's world, there was no such thing as absolute safety. Young ladies and gentlemen from rich and influential families would naturally bring along strong guards when they went out. They could be used to show off in daily life and could also be used to save lives in critical moments. Naturally, they were essential for traveling at home. What's more, he Fanbo can bring his own guards. Am I, Yunjian, any worse than him? Hoof! Now is the time to display the strength of my Yun family. Seeing the young master's gaze, the Yun family guard naturally knew what he had to do next. He had to help the young master gain the limelight. The Yun family guard nodded imperceptibly and stepped forwards. His tall and burly figure was expressionless, like a cold mountain. He stretched out a palm the size of a fan and pressed down. He wanted to crush this brat to the ground and crush all of his bones. He would make him wail on the ground like a pile of mud. Only like this would he be able to fully display the prestige and overbearingness of his Yun family. Of course, the reason the guard dared to do this was because he had already received information about Shang Junjun that his family had collected. This young lady with a gentle name seemed as delicate as a white rabbit, But the truth was that her heart was actually filled with a cruel and ruthless soul. This little scene in front of her could at most make her slightly excited. It was impossible for it to frighten her. With a loud bang, the earth shook and the ground beneath Qin Yu's feet began to disintegrate. His entire body seemed to shrink as he was pressed into the broken earth. Yun Zhan's eyebrows arched up. The arrogant attitude he revealed immediately froze on his face, and his eyes subconsciously widened. Those young men and women who had been sneering and waiting for a good show to begin were all frozen in place like puppets. There was quite a bit of movement, but the strength of your palm clearly isn't much at all. Qin Yu reached out a hand and flicked away some ashes on his black robes. His lips curved up in a cold and callous smile. Although I didn't need to fear you to begin with, it would have been better if I could have been in the right. But now, you are the one who attacked me first, so everything that follows can only be considered my counterattack in self-defense. Qin Yu pulled his feet out from the ground. He looked at the dignified and bewildered Yun family guard and said, "Are you ready? I'm going to attack." "Humph," the Yun family guard sneered. "You're just trying to play tricks on us. It's just that your mortal body is a bit stronger, and I haven't used my full strength yet. I want to see." Qin Yu didn't wait for the guard to finish speaking before he attacked. His fist punched out, and the scene in front of him immediately distorted. The surrounding air seemed to crazily compress, condensing into a nearly tangible mass that howled out. Bang! The Yun family's guard, who was tall and sturdy like a mountain range, didn't even have the chance to groan before he was sent flying by the hammer. Blood gushed out from every orifice of his body. With a plop sound, he fell to the ground and turned into a pile of mud. Looking at your momentum just now, you should have wanted to do this to me, right? Unfortunately, your strength is a bit lacking, so you shouldn't resent me for being beaten up like this. As Qin Yu finished speaking, he looked across at the group of young men and women who looked like frosted eggplants. He looked at their pale faces and smiled. "I am a very reasonable person. If I said I would vent my anger, then I will. So, you had best vent your anger for the little maid behind me. Otherwise I will be in a difficult position, and you will all feel even more uncomfortable." This sort of calm and unruffled manner, using a light and mocking tone to express their condescending attitude, had always been what people like them excelled at. Now that it was being used on someone else, it didn't feel good at all. But even if they didn't feel good, they could only endure it. That Yun family guard whose life or death was unknown was a good example placed in front of them. No one wanted to suffer the same fate as him. Yun Zhan's lips trembled. He was angry, but he was even more afraid. The reason he came out this time was because he was ordered to pursue the young miss of the Shang family. His family would certainly give him the greatest degree of support. So, the guard beside him was called Yun Dapeng. If he was given a name by his family, he certainly wasn't an ordinary character. In fact, several days ago, Yun Dapeng had been following beside the patriarch and was responsible for his safety. But now, in Yun Zhan's imagination, the most eye-catching bodyguard who could bring him so much honor and glory was dealt with by a single slap like a chicken or a stray dog. Just what sort of strength did this require? Pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger, this was absolutely pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Looking at Qin Yu again, it wasn't just Yun Zhan. Everyone looked at him as if they were looking at some old thing that was hiding his strength. Of course it was that old thing. Otherwise, how could he possibly be so strong? After all, we are all geniuses. Those that are stronger than us must be those that have cultivated for a longer period of time. Besides that, there is no other possibility. That's right, even if we are anxious and fearful right now, we are still proud and confident. Shang Junjun's mouth fell open, a look of fear on her face. Just by looking at her, one couldn't help but feel pity for her. "Brother Yin, I am afraid." Yun Zhan's body stiffened. He cursed inwardly. Whether or not she did this on purpose, with these words, it was impossible for him to remain silent with everyone else. After all, the person that was hammered to the ground and whose life or death was unknown was a guard of the Yun family. If he didn't dare to say a single word after being called out, then he really would become a joke. Taking a deep breath, Yunjan squeezed out a smile and said, "Miss Junjun, don't be afraid. Today is just a misunderstanding. As long as we can explain it, there will naturally be no more problems." He stepped forwards and cupped his hands together. "Fellow Taoist, how are you? I am a junior of the Eight Lakes Yun family. Today, we didn't get to know each other without fighting. If there is any misunderstanding, I ask that you don't take offense. Don't you think this is a bit shameful and will cause Shang Junjun to look down on you? Bah! If she looks down on me, then she looks down on me. How could that be more important than my life? This person in front of me had attacked in a dark and heavy manner. He didn't dare to bet that the name of the Yun family would be able to shake him. If he failed to show off and ended up being F***ked instead, he wouldn't even have a place to cry to." Qin Yu glanced at him. "The one who attacked just now, was it your guard?" Yunjan nodded. "He scared me. To be more accurate, he scared the little maid behind me. But I dote on her a great deal, so this is even more serious than scaring me. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Yunjan continued to nod. Qin Yu snapped his fingers. "I like to speak with smart people, and you brat are smart enough. So, come and express your sincerity. As long as my family's little maid is satisfied, then we can forget about the matter between us." Yunjan hesitated. He felt that if he were to obediently listen to Qin Yu after he had already announced his background, then he would lose a bit too much face. His lips moved, but before he could speak, he could feel Qin Yu's eyes light up with encouragement. His heart skipped a beat. Then it fiercely shrank, as if a giant, invisible hand had grasped him. "All right, I'll go over now." Yunjan lowered his head and walked over. His face was burning hot, but he rejoiced inwardly. He was very sure that if he spoke another word, he would surely be captured, and at that time he would absolutely have to pay an even greater price. Qin Yu nodded. "I told you I didn't see wrong. You brat, you are a smart fellow. First chat with my little maid. Then I'll continue to settle the score." He lifted a hand and pointed forward. Yes, don't look around, it's you. When I was half awake, just now, I heard that you sent someone to take the ice fox away. This matter has caused tremendous psychological damage to my little maid. How do you think we should resolve this?" Bo looked like he had been smeared with hot feces. He thought that if he was strong enough, he could just slap Qin Yu away. How the hell was he supposed to resolve this? But unfortunately, he didn't have the strength to do so. So he could only give up on these thoughts. He swept his eyes over his family's cold-faced guard. His body stiffened and a pleading look appeared in his eyes. "Young master, please don't make me do anything. Otherwise, what's the difference between that and asking me to die?" Thus, Bo immediately understood that it was time to lower his head. In any case, Yunjan was in front of him. Even if he were to fall to the ground, he wouldn't be the most shameful one. The juniors of great families, besides a few arrogant and conceited young masters who didn't know what was good for them, most of them had self-control. They all understood that a man or a woman had to be flexible. Bo took a deep breath and respectfully bowed. "I am deeply sorry for what happened before. I guarantee to fellow Taoists that I will do my best to obtain this misforgiveness." As he spoke, he strode over. Shang Junjun nearly blew up with anger. Although she didn't like these two brats from the start, their performance was a bit too shameful. That's right, this person is a bit fierce, but what background do we have? Even if he ate a bear's heart or a leopard's gall, would he really dare to attack us? You two spineless cowards are simply trash to the extreme. Facing Qin Yu's gaze, Shang Junjun slightly tightened her grip on the excited ice fox that wanted to break free. She said in a soft voice, "Little thing, what are you panicking about? If I don't let you go, you won't be able to go anywhere." Qin Yu raised an eyebrow. This little girl across from him was deliberately saying this for him to hear. It seemed that she had made up her mind to stand firm. But as a girl, even if she wanted to stand firm, What could she bring out to do so? However, he didn't plan on letting her off so easily to begin with. A woman who had a peaceful expression on her face, but was actually a sinister woman was the most detestable of all. Genius in a second, remember website. Mobile version. Chapter 994. Miss Junjun. My name is Shang Junjun. You seem to have a great backing. My background is like this, so there's nothing I can do about it. Qin Yu smiled. I wonder, what is your background? Shangyang, Shang family. Shang Junjun said in a soft voice. Her face revealed a subtle expression that said, I'm so fierce, are you afraid? Although she tried her best to appear calm, she was still a little girl. No matter how much she tried to hide it, she couldn't hide it at all. But unfortunately, a Shang family that could make an entire city be named after their family. No matter how fierce they were, to Qinyu and Xiang Shui, they weren't deterred at all. This was because they didn't know what sort of place Merchant City was, so they naturally didn't know what a so-called Shang family was. Shang Junjun's expression froze. She discovered that the man with the evil smile and the woman with the seductive face had calm expressions. They didn't respond at all to her mentioning the Shang family. This didn't seem like a disguise. Could it be that they came from some remote place and had never heard of the reputation of the Shang family? Shang Junjun furrowed her eyebrows. These people that came from remote villages and didn't have much experience were more difficult to deal with. Because they were ignorant, they were fearless and did things without scruples. It seemed that she could only bring up her cousin. With her cousin's status, no matter how remote they were, they must have heard of him. Taking a deep breath, Shang Junjun slowly straightened her back. There was a bit more of an indifference around her. My elder brother's name is Shang Lingyue. He entered the Peach Blossom Spring and is an elder's disciple. Right now, he is an honored guest of the Eastern Zhou family. I came here on my father's orders to pay my respects to my cousin. Before I left, I had already arranged a letter with my elder brother. If I am late, I fear my elder brother will come looking for me. At that time, you might not be able to explain yourself. You don't know about Merchant City, you don't know about Shang family, but looking at the existence of the Peach Blossom Spring, how many cultivators wouldn't revere it? You want me to lower my head like trash like Yun Zhan and Fan Bo? Dream on. Now, I fear it is your turn to feel fear in front of me. Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows. He slowly said, Your elder brother entered the Peach Blossom Spring? Shang Junjun raised her neck, white and clean like a swan. With an almost imperceptible movement, she gently nodded. So that you know that it is so. Qin Yu looked at her, his eyes bright and earnest. His reasoning told him that the grudge between him and the Peach Blossom Spring shouldn't involve a little girl who only had an indirect relationship with him. Moreover, if this matter wasn't handled properly, it might lead to trouble. However, if one's rationality could always control one's thoughts and actions, then there wouldn't be so many messy things happening in the world. Qin Yu was certain that he wasn't a messy person, but sometimes he couldn't completely control his own actions. So that's how it is. What a coincidence, Qin Yu said softly. As Xiang Shui was speaking with Yun Zhan and Fan Bo, she suddenly frowned. She had never heard of the Peach Blossom Spring before, but her intuition told her that Qin Yu's reaction was a bit abnormal after hearing this name. Without waiting for her to think further, Qin Yu continued to speak in a gentle tone. I have naturally heard of the prestige of the Peach Blossom Spring. Deep in my heart, I am filled with awe. Since we have this relationship, I won't make things difficult for you. First, exchange for the ice box. Second, solemnly apologize to my little maid. Shang Junjun's face was filled with anger and shock. Impossible. Qin Yu ignored her. He continued to say, there is also the third thing. Wait a moment and take out 3 times the compensation they gave to my maid. He raised 3 fingers, his eyes calm. Remember this well. You can't miss any of the 3 conditions I mentioned. Otherwise, I'm very sure that you'll feel extremely uncomfortable later on. Don't doubt my attitude. Towards a girl like you, who has such a great contrast in appearance, I will not be lenient. Shang Junjun felt as if she would explode from anger. Of course! She didn't know that not too long ago, Qin Yu had nearly caused a stone pagoda to explode from anger. Sometimes, even he didn't know just how talented he was in angering others. But at this time, Shang Junjun didn't dare to act out. Her reasoning told her that this man in front of her with a gentle tone and a calm expression really wasn't trying to scare her. But just what was his background? What was his background? He was someone who didn't even know the Shang family. So how could he treat her like this? In particular, she learned of her cousin, who was so eye-catching that the entire Shang family had benefited from him. Although she couldn't figure it out, the situation was beyond her control. Shang Junjun's breathing was rapid and deep. Her chest constantly rose and fell, so much so that one worried that the buttons on her chest would snap and fall off. Thus it was a hair-raising sight. But to lower her head like this was far too shameful. In particular, the eyes of Yunjan, Fanbo, and the others, as well as those little fox spirits that flattered her, made it increasingly difficult for her to accept this. Shang Junjun's face tightened. She coldly said, I can agree to all of your conditions, but because of this, you will become someone I don't welcome. If there is a chance in the future, I will definitely take action and demand everything you took from me today. Qin Yu smiled. Of course, you have the right to do so. If there is a chance, I will look forward to it. The group of young men and women quickly left after obtaining permission. Although their backs were a bit panicked, only a small number of them were in a sorry state. Thinking about it, this shocking matter would soon spread through their circles and become the topic of conversation for countless people. Compared to them, Yunjan and Fanbo were better off. Men knew when to yield and when to stand tall. Perhaps they would be looked upon more favorably by others. But Shang Junjun, did you hear? That concubine daughter of the Shang family relied on her good relationship with her cousin to strut around. But now, she had suffered a great setback and her face was completely stripped off. She was truly in a sorry state. After all, the schemes and plots between women were much more intense. And during this period of time, Shang Junjun had indeed offended many people. Watching these people leave, Qin Yu turned and looked at Xiang Shui, who was grinning from ear to ear. Xiang Shui was hugging the ice fox and calling it baby, baby, baby. He smiled and said, Are you satisfied with this method of venting your anger? Satisfied, satisfied. Xiang Shui beamed with joy, revealing her beautiful white teeth. You are so smart. Fighting and killing is so bloody. How can it be as comfortable as extorting others? But I think that little Shang girl has some background. You made her lose face today, so I'm afraid she will take revenge. And most importantly, you will be going to the East Zhou family. You will definitely meet again. Qin Yu nodded. I know. Xiang Shui curled her lips. You know it's not good to provoke her, but you still provoked her. Is it because your ego is too inflated? Or is there something I don't know about? Qin Yu sensed the seriousness in her eyes. He thought for a moment and said, A bit of both. You've already said that I have a heaven-defying teacher. Previously, those people in the God-confining gorge probably believed it. Now, they've spread a lot of fame for me. If I have to retreat in front of the younger sister of an unknown disciple of the Peach Blossom Spring, others definitely won't believe me. You have a grudge with the Peach Blossom Spring? Xiang Shui suddenly asked. One couldn't help but admit that a woman's intuition was so accurate that it made one break out in a cold sweat. Qin Yu thought for a moment. He felt that it was best not to tell her about this matter for the time being. After all, besides worrying, there wasn't any help at all. Moreover, if Xiang Shui revealed a flaw in her disguise and someone noticed something was wrong, then things would become troublesome. So he smiled and shook his head in a perfunctory manner. There's no such thing. Xiang Shui rolled her eyes. Who were you trying to fool? But since Qin Yu didn't want to say it, she didn't continue asking. She just secretly decided that she would pay extra attention to news about the peach blossom spring in the future. At the very least, she had to find out just who the other party was. This Chinyu brat, he was much more troublesome than she had imagined. She didn't know where a powerful opponent would pop out from. If he wasn't strong enough and lucky enough, he would have been killed long ago. Chin, you rapped her on the forehead. I can tell with a single glance that you're definitely not thinking about me. You should already know the coordinates of the Eastern Zhou family. Let's hurry over. We're already the last group to arrive, so don't miss the proper business. The lame horse and the old horse neighed, expressing their welcome to Chinyu. Then they moved their hooves, each step deep and shallow as they pulled the carriage forwards. The opening of the myriad soul Dao was approaching. Eastern Zhou Jolly had no choice but to stop her seclusion and begin to accept the guidance of the various seniors that her family had hired with a great deal of money. Although these people hadn't smoothly obtained the inheritance of the myriad soul Dao, they had still personally experienced it. And these experiences were incomparably precious to Eastern Zhou Jolly. After several hours of conversation, Eastern Zhou Jolly respectfully sent off the cultivators in front of her. Then she stood up and gently rubbed her temples. There were far too many things that she needed to remember, and she had to screen them. After all, the myriad soul Dao was known for its infinite transformations. Who knew whether or not the things that these people said were true? After all, disregarding the sinister winds within her family, even her enemies of the Eastern Zhou family absolutely didn't want to see her smoothly obtain the inheritance of the myriad soul Dao. It was impossible to rule out the possibility that they had done something to her. Miracle Doctor, he pushed open the door and entered. He cupped his hands together and bowed. Mississippi, Eastern Zhou Jolly looked over. How was it? Miracle Doctor, he shook his head. Eastern Zhou Jolly sighed. She let out a long breath. It looks like my luck wasn't good enough. I wasn't able to obtain this mister's help. Miracle Doctor, he comforted her. Miss has already made all the necessary preparations. Even if you can't find Chinyu, well, although I know that it can't be the same person, I still feel a bit uncomfortable mentioning this name. In short, Miss will definitely succeed. Eastern Zhou Jolly smiled. I hope so. The first time she heard this name, even she felt incredulous. But she soon suppressed some unrealistic thoughts in her heart. It was the same name, but it was impossible for it to be the same person. After all, even though Qin Yu's performance was breathtaking and even stirred her heart, how could he be compared to that person in the God-forbidding gorge? Whatever. If the Eastern Zhou family couldn't find him, then her other competitors likely wouldn't be able to either. Then everyone would have to rely on their own methods. And she wasn't without advantages. Oldie, I heard that Brother Shang's favorite little sister has arrived. Today, I will hold a banquet to personally welcome her. Old Yi cupped his hands together. Yes, miss. And at this time the person that Eastern Zhou Jolly and everyone else had been searching for all this time was comfortably sitting in a carriage and arriving at the Eastern Zhou family's camp. In front of them wasn't a city, but a vast expanse of buildings that stretched out endlessly. The scale was vast and magnificent. There were no walls built because there was no need, because this entire world was under the control of the Eastern Zhou family. They were a giant existence that directly or indirectly controlled 100 worlds. If they couldn't even manage their headquarters well and were still invaded by others, then they really might as well buy a piece of soft white tofu and smash their head against it to death. A genius remembers website address. Mobile version. Chapter 995. Between the endless clusters of buildings, several invisible auras shot into the heavens. They were like towering mountains that emitted an endless pressure. This was the strength that the Eastern Zhou family clan had placed on the surface to deter all others. But Qin Yu didn't doubt that they were hiding even more. They were truly worthy of being called a giant-level existence that ruled over 100 worlds. The strength and background they possessed were unimaginably terrifying. Xiang Shui tapped the shaft of the carriage. When the old horse and lame horse stopped, she turned and said, "We've arrived. What should we do next?" Qin Yu smiled. "Of course, we need to find a place to stay first." That's it. Xiang Shui curled her lips. "When did you learn to play these mysterious tricks? You clearly want to run up to them right now, but you still act so stubbornly." Qin Yu thought to himself, "If you speak so bluntly, aren't you afraid that I'll fly into a rage out of shame and teach you a lesson?" He humphed. "You don't understand." Although everything Xiang Shui said was correct, and he was indeed incomparably eager, he couldn't really rush up to them on his own initiative. Otherwise, why would he need to show off so much in the God-forgetting gorge? Qin Yu had to ensure that he was invited by the Eastern Zhou family clan on their own initiative. This would reduce a great deal of trouble in the future and allow him to occupy a relatively active position. As the carriage continued forward, in the core region of the Eastern Zhou family clan, in a grand hall, a banquet was being held. Eastern Zhou Jolly personally accompanied the guests, drinking with a man across from her. From time to time, she would turn and speak with a beautiful and petite woman to her side so that she wouldn't feel left out. The atmosphere of the entire banquet was excellent. It continued for 4 hours. After the host and guests chatted for a moment, they all happily dispersed. Eastern Zhou Jolly stood up and sent the 2 people out with a smile. The man's back was straight and his eyes were calm and tranquil. His gaze occasionally fell on her, revealing a bit of appreciation and praise. The woman beside him tried her best to appear calm, but there was an unconcealable cautiousness in her expression. After all, she had always been proud of her background. Compared to Eastern Zhou Jolly, the difference was like the difference between mud and clouds. If it weren't for her cousin, she probably wouldn't have the qualifications to be invited to a banquet by the other party in this lifetime. Not to mention, the other party was extremely gentle to her throughout the entire banquet, making her feel like she was bathing in the spring breeze. Subconsciously, she had a good impression of him. After bidding farewell to her master, the man walked in front while she followed behind him with her head lowered. She had retracted her bared fangs and brandished claws, becoming incomparably gentle. At this moment, the man suddenly spoke. "Little sister, I heard that you ran into some trouble 2 days ago?" "You finally asked me." Shang Junjun's mind shook. Ever since she came to Shang Clan, she had never mentioned it because she was sure that her brother would hear about it through other channels. Humph. To be able to be questioned by my elder brother so quickly, I have to thank those little hussies who are gossiping behind my back. But on the surface, her pretty face was slightly flushed, revealing a trace of embarrassment, shame, and then an expression of forbearance. "No, nothing." Shang Lingyue glanced at her. "These years, you have indeed been too arrogant. It is a good thing to be taught a lesson. It can sharpen your temper and let you know that there is always someone better out there, so that you won't get into big trouble in the future." After a slight pause, he continued, "From today onwards, let Third Shadow stay by your side and help you deal with some trivial matters, so that your mood won't be spoiled by others. Go out and have a good stroll. There are still many fun places in the Eastern Zhou clan's territory." Shang Junjun respectfully bowed. "Yes, elder brother." Joy appeared in her eyes. Although on the surface, she was reprimanded by Shang Lingyue, but her cousin still cared about her. Otherwise, why would he arrange for Third Shadow to be with her? One had to know that this was a close guard that only disciples of Peach Blossom Spring had the qualifications to obtain. His strength was incomparably strong. If Third Shadow had been by her side, how could she have been humiliated by that brat? "You, and the little slut beside you, better not let me see you again. Otherwise, I will definitely let you know what fear and regret is." Third Shadow wore a mask, so his appearance couldn't be seen clearly. Only a pair of cold eyes could be seen. They were like 2 round balls polished from ice, without the slightest fluctuation of emotions. He was just standing there, motionless, but everyone could feel a cold chill gushing out from the depths of their hearts. It was as if he was a bloodthirsty, hunting beast in hibernation. Once he opened his sharp teeth and claws, he would destroy everything. Shang Junjun held a gathering in the name of bonding. Because of the existence of Third Shadow, he was in the limelight at the gathering. In particular, after someone at the gathering pointed out that Shadow 3 came from the peach blossom spring that transcended the outside world, the respect and envy Shang Junjun received increased by several times. So the rumors were true. The Shang clan had really produced a peerless genius that entered Peach Blossom Spring. And this genius was Shang Junjun's cousin. The two of them had a close relationship since young and doted on her. Now it seemed that this was indeed the case. Otherwise, why would he send his guards to follow beside Shang Junjun? This was obviously to support Shang Junjun. After today, the news that was circulating in the dark would soon disappear without a trace. Shang Junjun's wounded heart was greatly healed and satisfied. There was a faint smile at the corner of her mouth as she accepted everyone's direct and subtle compliments. But even though she had once again received the respect of these people, there was still a trace of regret in the depths of her heart. That brat, since he knew that her brother was a guest at the Dongzhou clan, naturally did not dare to come near. Most likely, he had escaped to some faraway place. Even if she wanted to meet him again, the chances were slim. Who knew when she could vent the anger in her heart? Perhaps she should think of a way to let her cousin personally ask the Dongzhou clan to help find that brat. With the strength of the Dongzhou clan, as long as they acted, it would be an inescapable net. No matter where that brat escaped to, he would definitely not be able to hide. When I go back, I will find a chance to ask my cousin for help. What kind of status do I have? How can I not take revenge after being humiliated by you? As she thought of this, Shang Junjun felt that today's banquet seemed to be meaningless. Of course, she had already shown off what she could and had let these people know once again what the gap between them was. There was no loss in leaving now. Just as Shang Junjun was about to open her mouth and leave, she suddenly stopped in her tracks and stared outside at a horse carriage coming up the long street. Several young men surrounding her who were constantly fawning over her immediately sensed her abnormality. Following her gaze, their expressions also changed. As the center of the entire banquet, the performance of Shang Junjun and the few people around her quickly spread. After a few breaths, the lively banquet fell into a silent silence. Everyone looked at the horse carriage on the long street that was approaching unhurriedly. Even though they kept telling themselves that they had to remain calm, their slightly distorted faces still showed the restless emotions in their hearts. Some of the young ladies who had watched Shang Junjun put on a show all raised their hands to cover their mouths and exclaimed softly, their eyes brightening. Although it hadn't been long, the news of Shang Junjun being ruthlessly humiliated and losing face had already spread like wildfire. Everyone wanted to know who the person who didn't fear the reputation of the Peach Blossom Spring was and who pressed her to the ground and rubbed her. But it was a pity that on that day, no one had been able to figure out the other party's strength, and identity information was a complete blank. Therefore, perhaps out of curiosity, there were countless versions of this person's appearance in the information that circulated. It was a very ordinary horse carriage with a thin layer of dust on its surface. It was obvious that it had traveled a long distance. There were two very special horses pulling the carriage. One was very old. Its fur had lost its luster, and its eyelids were drooping. However, it liked to show that it was still full of energy and liked to tease the other horse from time to time. The other horse beside it was lame. It was unknown what happened to this lame horse. Its left front hoof was injured and it limped when it walked. However, it was very stable when it pulled the carriage. Furthermore, it was incomparably arrogant and didn't care about the old horse's attempts to get close to it. If it came a little closer, it would open its mouth and bite down mercilessly. The one driving the carriage was a young maid. Her appearance was extremely beautiful, and there was a hint of coquettishness in her eyes. When one looked at her, they couldn't help but feel a fire burning in their hearts. Although there were some discrepancies between the different versions, it was roughly the same content that everyone had heard countless times. Therefore, as they looked at the horse carriage on a long street, everyone silently compared it, and their expressions became more and more interesting. The carriage was very ordinary and covered in dust. The horses pulling the carriage were the same, one old and one lame. The one driving the carriage was also a woman. Although it was a little far away and her appearance was a little blurry, the coquettish aura in the haze couldn't be concealed. Of course, more importantly, Shang Junjun's expression was fluctuating at this moment. No one was blind. How could they not see that her face was dark and gloomy and that she was almost biting her white teeth to pieces? Could it really be such a coincidence? It couldn't be. Shang Junjun had borrowed the powerful guards of her cousin today to show off in front of everyone and save her face. What was the meaning of her appearing now? Even if it was a coincidence, it couldn't be so coincidental. Compared to this, face-slapping and whatnot was child's play. What he was doing was directly raising his feet and jumping on people's faces. But no matter what, one thing was certain. There was going to be a good show to watch. Not only because the Eastern Zhou family's encampment strictly forbade all personal fights, but also because did this ruthless person who dared to not give Shang Junjun face and directly pressed her down on the ground have no background? Don't forget, Shang Junjun had said that this person clearly knew that Shang Lingyue was here, yet he still casually came. What did this mean? TSK, it seemed that this person was also an absolute strong person. He didn't even put her in his heart. Interesting, very interesting. Shang Junjun took a deep breath, her chest rising high, revealing a shocking curve. She turned around and swept her eyes across the crowd, the corners of her mouth curling up slightly. It seems that regarding the embarrassing matter that Junjun experienced that day, everyone already knows. Then I won't waste my breath explaining. As the saying goes, when enemies meet, their eyes turn especially red. Although I don't have any deep enmity with this person, but any enmity is enmity. Since we've met, of course we can't pretend not to see each other. So I must make a move and get back at him. She glanced at Ing San, who was quietly standing behind her like a shadow. His aura didn't fluctuate at all. She said softly, I remember that brother once mentioned to me that out of respect for his identity, the Eastern Zhou family has given you all special privileges. When faced with an unexpected situation, you can act on your own, right? Ing San's cold voice sounded out from beneath his mask. Yes. Shang Junjun smiled. Very good. Then what are you waiting for? Make a move now. Bring the two people in that carriage to me. Ing San cupped his hands together and stepped out. Outside the restaurant, there was an array formation that could block out wind and sand. This was to give guests a better dining experience and enjoyment, and it also had excellent defensive capabilities. After all, this was a restaurant used by cultivators. If it was too weak, then wouldn't it need to be constantly repaired? But now, this array only lit up slightly before it was directly torn apart, like a bubble. The runes tumbled and dissipated. With the sharp sound of an alarm, Ing San crossed the street and arrived above the carriage. He lifted a hand and pressed down. Chapter 996. I am Shadow 3 from the Peach Blossom Land. I was ordered to follow my disciple Shang Lingyue and become his shadow. I have to follow his will and treat him as my master forever. Actually, many years ago, I also had the chance to become a disciple of the Peach Blossom Land. Unfortunately, I failed by a hair's breadth. In order to stay in the Peach Blossom Land, I willingly became a shadow guard. My name is Shadow 3. This 3 represents my strength. In the entire shadow guard system, I am ranked 3rd. I am not bragging. Being ranked 3rd is really amazing. So, at the start, I didn't really care about Shang Lingyue. Although I was respectful to him, it was only because the hierarchy of the Peach Blossom Land didn't allow for provocation. Later on, I discovered that Shang Lingyue was hiding his true potential and ambition under his ordinary appearance. Only then did I accept him and treat him as my master. Although I didn't understand why he would care so much about a sister who wasn't related to him, out of respect for Shang Lingyue, I would still follow his will and listen to Shang Junjun's orders. So, after she clearly expressed her attitude, I didn't hesitate to make a move. At that moment, I jumped out and instantly smashed the restriction formation outside the restaurant. In the blink of an eye, I was on the long street and above the carriage. My gaze landed on the surface of the carriage. It must be really, really cold. Because the cultivator in the carriage didn't just insult Shang Junjun. He also showed a provocation towards the Peach Blossom Land. Knowing that Shang Lingyue was here, he still dared to swagger over. It was obvious that he didn't care about him at all. No matter if the other party was really strong or if he didn't know how high the heavens were. As Shang Lingyue's shadow guard, he couldn't hold back. Originally, I thought that even if the other party had a big background, it couldn't compare to the Peach Blossom Land behind him. However, what happened next proved that I was wrong. I was very, very wrong. This carriage and the person it represented were indeed not to be trifled with. Actually, the moment I made my move, I already felt it. Because when I used all my strength, it felt like I was punching a mountain. The rebounding force was like a river bursting its banks, surging towards me. It was endless. So, after a loud sound, I was sent flying and my nose was filled with blood. Inside and outside the restaurant, the entire street suddenly fell silent. The confused cultivator slightly opened his mouth. What was going on? You took the initiative to jump out and make a move. But in the blink of an eye, before you could even do anything, you were sent flying. Blood gushed out from every orifice of your head like it was free. Although seeing you spurt out blood is a very exciting thing, you should at least let us know what is going on in front of us, right? Inside the restaurant, those who heard Shang Junjun's words and knew what had happened were even more shocked by the scene before them. Even though it was the first time Shadow 3 had met him, but with his identity, he was bound to be tyrannical. After all, he was from the Peach Blossom Spring. But now, with a single strike, he had been reduced to such a sorry state. No, to be exact, he hadn't even shown his face, but he had already caused 3 shadow hammers to spit out blood. This was obviously even more terrifying. Schwa, schwa. Many gazes landed on the long street, on the carriage that had stopped, revealing deep respect. Then, these gazes shifted to Shang Junjun. There was always something strange in their eyes. The general meaning was, who asked you to act so arrogantly, but now you're being pressed to the ground again. Moreover, you're facing downwards, constantly rubbing against each other. Shang Junjun's face certainly hadn't hit the ground, but now it was twisted beyond recognition. It was like this again. In the past, Yunjan's guard had been defeated in a single strike, and now Shadow 3 had suffered the same fate. Was your nickname the Terminator Guard? But Shadow 3 came from the Peach Blossom Spring, so he naturally had his own strong points. He wasn't someone that Yun Dapeng could compare with. So, even though he was being hammered until he was bleeding from his nose and mouth, he still tried his best to not appear too distressed. Bang! With a loud explosion, Shadow 3's feet fell to the ground. The ground instantly shattered, and he rapidly retreated, each step leaving behind a deep mark. He stopped with difficulty. His chest shook, and he spat out several mouthfuls of blood before he felt a little better. Shadow 3 looked up. His eyes fell onto the carriage, shaking and freezing. So strong! He took a deep breath and suppressed the shaking in his chest. Shadow 3 slowly said, "Miss, please leave here." He was a shadow guard and had been ordered to follow Shang Junjun. Her safety was his top priority. Now he no longer had the confidence he could protect her. He was thorough. But Shadow 3 was a shadow guard of the Peach Blossom Spring. To a certain extent, he represented a part of the Peach Blossom Spring. Of course, It was impossible for him to leave after being severely wounded. Even if he wasn't a match and died here, he wouldn't take half a step back. Shang Junjun screamed. I'm staying here. I'm not going anywhere. Shadow 3 frowned. But thinking that this was the Eastern Zhou family's encampment, he didn't say anything more. His battle with the person in the carriage had already been noticed. No matter what, the Eastern Zhou family wouldn't watch on helplessly as something happened to Shang Junjun. When he spoke up to warn her, he had already fulfilled his duty as a guard. Now, it was time to fight for the reputation of the Peach Blossom Spring, even if he died. Taking a deep breath, Shadow 3 straightened his body. He didn't seem to move at all, but there was a loud crackling sound within his body. His pale face began to turn ruddy at a speed visible to the naked eye, and his aura rapidly rose. In the blink of an eye, he broke through his limits and showed no signs of stopping. To the outside world, the shadow guards of the Peach Blossom Spring were the shadows of their master. At a critical moment, they could die in place of their master. Since they were going to die in place of their master in a moment of danger, how could they not have some desperate methods? Shadow 3 had decided to go all out. Bang, bang. Around his body, streams of air exploded, causing space to distort. Large stretches of peach forest that stretched as far as the eye could see appeared. Now, in this peach forest, pink peach blossoms were in full bloom. Everyone on and off the street could smell the fragrance of peach blossoms. With a loud roar, the peach forest that grew out of the distorted space seemed to be blown away by a strong wind. Countless petals rolled up and gathered, wrapping around the carriage in layers. The rumors about the Peach Blossom Spring were true. There were countless peach trees that bloomed all year round, representing some sort of transcendent great Tao. It was naturally impossible for Shadow 3 to display this great Tao, but the secret technique he used with all his might contained a trace of this great Tao. Even though it was only a small portion, it was still terrifying enough. In the divine realm, there was no match for him. Even ordinary original divinities had to retreat. Within the room, Shang Lingyue, who was cultivating with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. A sharp light burst out from them. Peach Blossom Spring. Shua, without any hesitation. He stood up and took a step forwards. His figure instantly vanished. In the next moment, Shang Lingyue's figure appeared beside Shang Junjun. A jade pendant was tied to her waist, its surface emitting light. Big brother! Shang Junjun was overjoyed. Her eyes immediately turned red. Seeing that she was fine, Shang Lingyue's heart calmed down. He nodded and looked at the carriage that was wrapped in countless peach blossoms. His eyebrows immediately furrowed. He was well aware of Shadow 3's strength. For him to be able to force him into a desperate situation, it was clear just how strong he was. Big brother, the one in the carriage, is the one who humiliated me in the past. That is why I had Shadow 3 take action, but I never thought things would turn out like this. It was all my fault. I ask for Big Brother's forgiveness. Shang Junjun had a guilty expression on her face. Shang Lingyue comforted her in a soft voice. It's fine. I'm here. Just as his voice fell, his complexion changed. He looked up at the street. At almost the same time, the incalculable number of peach blossoms that wrapped around the carriage suddenly collapsed, vanishing from sight. Shadow 3, who had a ruddy complexion and an astonishing aura, suddenly felt as if his spine had been pulled out. His essence, energy, and divine scattered, and he slumped to the ground. Shua! Shang Lingyue's figure appeared beside him. He lifted a hand and took out a pail with lines interweaving into scales, directly placing it into Shadow 3's mouth. Shadow 3's aura immediately stabilized. Although he had inevitably been severely wounded, he had managed to preserve his life. His eyes were filled with gratitude and guilt. I am incompetent. It isn't worth wasting a treasure pill. Shang Lingyue patted his shoulder. As long as you are alive, you can help me more. Don't think about these things and just rest well. With a flick of his sleeves, an invisible force sent Shadow 3 to a safe zone. Shang Lingyue stood up and looked up at the quiet carriage. You injured my people. Are you not going to show yourself and explain yourself? His voice was calm, but it was natural and filled with an unquestionable momentum. Xiang Shui jumped off the carriage. She glanced at Shang Lingyue. The man across from her, although his aura wasn't too strong, he still gave her an incomparably dangerous feeling. However, she wasn't nervous at all. Qin Yu's current aura was inexplicably mysterious, and even she couldn't clearly sense it. She didn't think he would suffer a loss. Creak! The carriage opened from the inside, and Qin Yu stepped out. He instantly attracted countless eyes. His expression was calm. He lightly said, "An explanation is needed, but you should be the one to give it to me." Whoosh! Within the restaurant, there were loud gasps. When Shang Lingyue appeared just now, they had subconsciously restrained their breathing. It had to be known that he was a disciple of the Peach Blossom Spring, the legendary Peach Blossom Spring. It was because of this that when they heard Qin Yu's forceful words, they felt an intense impact. Shang Junjun sneered, "You have no idea of death or danger." Although the others didn't speak, looking at their expressions, they likely had similar thoughts. Shang Lingyue had a calm expression. "I didn't know the reason for the conflict between you and my little sister, so I didn't mention it for now. But today, I saw with my own eyes that you nearly killed my shadow guard. He took the initiative to attack, so I can't fight back." Fighting back doesn't require killing. It's just that your skills are inferior. Shang Lingyue narrowed his eyes. "Are you saying that if I have enough strength, I can also try to kill you?" Qin Yu had no expression. "You can try." With the strength of the Peach Blossom Spring, he indeed didn't dare to provoke them. But he was just a mere disciple. Did he have to lower his head? "Very good." Shang Lingyue slowly nodded. "Then let me experience your strength." At this time, there was the sound of breaking air. A voice shouted out, "Brother Shang, please stop!" Qin Yu's eyes flashed. He looked up and met the woman's gaze. He never thought that there would be such a coincidence that he would see her on the first day. Schwa, schwa, with East Zhou Jolly in the lead. Several figures fell down. She deeply looked at Qin Yu and then arrived at Shang Lingyue's side. "Brother Shang, that person is a friend of mine. He definitely doesn't know who you are." Thus there was a misunderstanding. "I ask that senior apprentice, brother, show mercy." As she spoke, she turned and glared at Qin Yu. "Qin Yu, hurry up and apologize to brother Shang." Qin Yu coughed and rubbed his nose. It seemed that he was being looked down upon. But from East Zhou Jolly's point of view, it was clearly for Qin Yu's own good. After all, he was a remote native cultivator of a small world that hadn't even formed an original divinity. Even if he had used some unknown method to arrive here, how could he possibly become enemies with Shang Lingyue? Even if he had outstanding talent, sometimes background was more important than talent. Shang Lingyue frowned. "Miss East Zhou, is he really your friend?" East Zhou Jolly nodded. "I haven't known him for long, but I owe him a great favor." Of course, it was a great favor. If it weren't for Qin Yu, she feared she would have already been defeated in the competition, and it would have been impossible for her to obtain the qualifications to enter the Myriad Soul Dao. Shang Lingyue pondered for a moment and said slowly, "Since that's the case, as long as this person apologizes to my sister and Ing-san, the matter will be resolved." It was unknown when Shang Junjun had arrived by his side. She pouted when she heard this. But she also knew that since Eastern Zhou Jolly had personally come forward and clearly expressed that she owed Qin Yu a great favor, Shang Lingyue could only give up. After all, she was the daughter of the first wife of the Eastern Zhou clan. In terms of status, she was not inferior to Shang Lingyue. "Humph. Even if I can't teach you a lesson, you still have to lower your head in front of me. I want to see how you can continue to be so arrogant." On the long street, inside and outside the restaurant, all the cultivators watching this battle felt disappointed. He thought to himself that they were about to enter the true climax, but with the appearance of the East Joe Buddhist pair, it was all over. As for whether Qin would lower his head, was there even a need to say it? Unless he was a fool who could not understand that East Joe Shari was already protecting him now. There were people who were stubborn, arrogant, and ignorant, but there were very few people who would act foolishly in the face of disaster. It seemed that things would end like this. What a pity. They originally thought that the cultivator in the carriage had some great background and would be able to have a fiery battle with the disciples of the Peach Blossom Spring. But it was clear that the situation was far from what everyone imagined. The long street gradually quietened down. Many eyes fell on Qin, revealing a bit of ridicule and mockery. Just now he had put on a brave and arrogant appearance, but now he had to lower his head and admit defeat. This was indeed a bit shameful. But as long as he wasn't the one who was slapped in the face and turned into an idiot, he was still quite happy. East Joe Buddhist pair furrowed her eyebrows. Although she hadn't interacted with Qin much, she could sense that this boy had a bit of pride in his heart. Now that he was in front of everyone and had to lower his head and apologize, it might be a bit difficult for him. But even if it was difficult, it was better than losing his life. She was well aware of Shang Lingyue's strength. If it weren't for this, her family wouldn't have regarded him with such importance. Seeing Qin not move, East Joe Buddhist pair sucked in a deep breath. Qin, what about face? In the face of life or death, it wasn't worth mentioning at all. If one couldn't even be flexible, then they were just trash. Chapter 997. Helplessness appeared in Qin Yu's eyes. He wanted to become Eastern Joe Jili's follower, but in the end, it was because he needed help from her. At this time, he had rejected her good intentions and caused Eastern Joe Jili to lose face. No matter how he looked at it, it was a bit inappropriate. But Qin didn't feel too troubled, because someone soon explained things for him. Qin. On the side of the street, a cultivator frowned, as if he were thinking of something he had forgotten. This was because, just a moment ago, his brain had been in a state of excitement. Now that it had come to a sudden stop, it was lacking in oxygen, and its speed was slow. Thus he paused for a moment. Only then did he remember why this name gave him an extremely familiar feeling. The cultivator's eyes widened. He looked at Qin, who was calmly standing beside the carriage with a trace of helplessness in his eyes. Tumbling waves rose in his heart. That's right, it was helplessness, it was helplessness. If he hadn't thought of his identity, he might have thought this expression was bitterness and hesitation. But now, he could confirm that Qin was truly feeling helpless about the current situation. No wonder he didn't fear Shang Lingyue, even though he knew he came from the Peach Blossom Land. If he was Qin, then everything could be explained. Qin. It was unknown where, but a cultivator suddenly cried out in alarm. The street suddenly fell silent. As the cultivator was thinking about this, he was secretly annoyed. He shouldn't have thought too much about this. Now that he had caught everyone's attention, it had been snatched away by someone else. I can't wait any longer. I have to speak up right now, otherwise it will be too late. He is Qin, that Qin. The two consecutive voices caused the huge street to suddenly fall silent. Countless cultivators widened their eyes. As they looked at the black-robed man standing beside the carriage, thunder rumbled in their hearts. During this period of time, the most shocking and eye-catching matter wasn't the little saintess of the underworld illusion. She had created a dance called the Heavenly Demon Dance, a dance that was said to be able to make one's soul lose themselves in it. All right, this dance was indeed captivating. Anyone who had the qualifications to see it would be unable to forget it, and for the next several days they were left in a daze. However, what was even more unbelievable was that in the God-confining gorge, there was a cultivator who went crazy and tried to solve the question of the rules at least 3 times in a row. When it came to the 99th question, he gave up without exception. Moreover, the most important point was that the God-confining gorge had suddenly disappeared. Everyone had their own guesses as to what this meant, but it was definitely related to that crazy cultivator. That cultivator's name was Chinyu. Shang Junjun's eyes widened. She looked at Chinyu beside the carriage. She couldn't associate him with the incomparably powerful and mysterious cultivator she had heard about. He was Chinyu? He was Chinyu? This was impossible. Shang Lingyue frowned slightly, and his eyes were filled with seriousness. No matter how proud he was in his heart, no matter how much he thought highly of himself, he could not place the person who caused the waves in the God-confining gorge in an extremely important position. He took a deep breath and suppressed the shock in his heart. He looked at Dongzhou Jelly and slowly said, "Miss Dongzhou, is he Chinyu?" This clearly wasn't a simple question of a person's name. Dongzhou Jelly bitterly smiled. As expected, once this name was exposed, it would have a shocking effect. But what a pity he wasn't him. Otherwise, she wouldn't have to waste so much effort to explain. This friend of mine is indeed called Chinyu, but he should only have the same name as that person in the God-confining gorge. The two of them shouldn't be related. Shang Lingyue's eyebrows relaxed. He nodded and didn't say anything else. Shang Junjun took a deep breath. Her field of vision darkened. It was only then that she discovered that because of her nervousness just now, she had actually suffocated. But this didn't count for anything. As long as Chinyu wasn't that Chinyu, everything was fine. I knew that someone like you couldn't possibly be that extremely powerful existence in the legends. At this time, on the quiet side of the street, a closed shop was suddenly opened from the inside. Several cultivators smiled as they respectfully sent off the person inside. Looking at the signboard of the shop, it seemed to be a shop that dealt with spirit pets and war beasts. It was clear that this shop had considerable defensive capabilities. After the entrance was closed and the spell arrays were activated, it isolated itself from the outside world. Thus, no one noticed the battle between Chinyu and Shadow 3 just now. The group of people were caught off guard. As they arrived on such a quiet street, they were immediately startled. Just what was going on? Without waiting for them to think or ask, the several smiling cultivators hurriedly bowed. "I greet forth, miss." Dongzhou Jelly was ranked fourth amongst the juniors of the Dongzhou family. These people were all servants of the Dongzhou family. Seeing Dongzhou Jelly, who was currently in the limelight and was destined to become one of the rulers of the Dongzhou family in the future, not directly kneeling to the ground was already a sign of flattery. As Dongzhou Jelly was thinking about how to ease the atmosphere, her eyes flashed as she saw several people. "What are you doing?" One of the cultivators respectfully said, reporting to fourth miss, "A batch of precious spirit beast cubs entered the shop some time ago. The situation isn't too good, so we asked the beast-taming sex, Mr. Zhou Pei, to help us today. We were just about to send Mr. Zhou away." The beast-taming sex, Zhou Pei, this was a name that Dongzhou Jelly had heard before. Or, it was more accurate to say that as long as there was someone that wanted to compete for her position as the last follower, and also someone with relatively outstanding strength, she had already looked up the relevant information ahead of time. This Zhou Pei was one of the more conspicuous ones. His cultivation wasn't weak, and he also had the support of various spirit beasts with him. His overall strength was quite good. Dongzhou Jelly nodded and said, "So it is fellow Taoist Zhou Pei from the beast-taming sect. Nice to meet you." With her status, treating Zhou Pei with such an attitude could already be considered courteous. But what caused Dongzhou Jelly to furrow her eyebrows was that Zhou Pei didn't respond at all. He didn't even respond to her initiative. The complexions of the several cultivators in the spirit pet shop changed. One of them lowered his voice and hurriedly reminded, "Mr. Zhou Pei, fourth miss." Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted. Zhou Pei strode forwards and bowed. His expression was one of pleasant surprise and joy. The joy that surged in his eyes was even thicker than when he saw his parents. "Fellow Taoist Qin, it has only been several dozen days since we parted in the God-forgetting gorge. Fellow Taoist's appearance is even greater than before. so you must have had a great harvest. I am truly envious of you." His eyes turned to Xiang Shui, and his smile became even more exaggerated. "Miss Shui, how do you do? Your appearance is becoming more and more beautiful. It just so happens that I recently obtained a bottle of top-quality snow toad cream. When I refined it, the snow toad cream was already 10,000 years old, so it is easy to maintain one's youthful appearance. It just so happens that I can give it to Miss Shui. Only someone as beautiful as a flower is worthy of this treasure." As he spoke, he flipped his hand and took out a blue jade bottle. From its appearance, one could tell that it was of considerable value. He presented it with both hands, his expression full of sincerity, as if he would be heartbroken if she didn't accept it. Of course, this only proved that Zhou Pei's acting skills were top-notch. As for his heartbreak, that was because the treasure had left him. This was a priceless 10,000-year snow toad cream. He had spent a great deal of effort to obtain it. He originally wanted to curry favor with her, but now all of that had been for naught. Dong Zhou, Jilly's mind was firm and tenacious. At this time there was a buzzing sound in her mind and she felt a little dizzy. Previously, she had already looked up information on Zhou Pei, so she knew that he had left the God-forgetting gorge through a sacrificial ritual not too long ago. Moreover, the matter of Zhou Pei offending Qin and being extorted by Qin was only recorded in 2 lines. In other words, Zhou Pei knew that Qin from the God-forgetting gorge, and he was in awe of him. Looking at the scene in front of them, as long as one wasn't mentally retarded, they would be able to come to an unbelievable conclusion. This Qin was that Qin. There was no such thing as having the same name or surname. They were the same person. Taking a deep breath, Dong Zhou, Jelly couldn't help but roll her eyes at Qin. After doing this subconscious action, she realized that it was inappropriate. Her face immediately turned red, but she quickly covered it up. There was anger in her chest. Although everything was just her guess, and it had nothing to do with Qin, she was still a woman. She always had the privilege of being unreasonable. More than that, she couldn't suppress her joy. Qin was Qin. Of course, he would help her and become one of her followers. Dong Zhou, Jilly had absolute confidence in this. Even if news of his appearance here was leaked after today, there was absolutely no one who could poach him away. But how did he do it? What happened in the God-forgetting gorge? He solved the 99th question of the rules at least 3 times, and in the end, the God-forgetting gorge suddenly disappeared. This Qin, she had already seen that he wasn't ordinary, but she didn't think that she would still underestimate him. Qin certainly noticed Dong Zhou, Jelly rolling her eyes at him, as well as her slight anger and joy. As he thought, his previous efforts hadn't been in vain. He was 90% certain that he would be able to become a follower. Thinking of this, his mood improved. As he looked at Zhou Pei in front of him, he felt that his rough face had become much more pleasing to the eye. Qin patted his shoulder and said, "Let bygones be bygones. Put it away, we can't take it." Or could it be that he had already been marked by Qin and his every move was being monitored by someone he couldn't sense? Thinking of this, Zhou Pei's entire body stiffened. His first thought was, "My acting skills are so exquisite, so how did you see through it?" Thinking of this, Zhou Pei's entire body froze. The cold chill in his heart began to spread outwards. "What do you want to do?" "Qin, just what do you want to do? I've already reached this step, so why are you still like this? When a rabbit is anxious it will bite, and when a sow is anxious it will climb a tree. Be careful that you don't go too far. Zhou Pei, will not be able to endure it and will counterattack." Zhou Pei clenched his teeth. He felt as if he were on the verge of exploding. When he looked up and saw Qin warm and smiling face, he immediately shivered. "No, I can't be impulsive. Living is such a wonderful thing. As long as there is a chance, I can't take the initiative to die." Laughing dryly, Zhou Pei flipped his hand and took out an identical jade bottle. I almost forgot. Back then, that 10,000-year-old snow toad was so fat that it barely managed to refine 2 bottles of snow toad paste. Today I'll give both to Miss Shui. If you use it sparingly, it can last you many years. I'm sorry, my dear number 2. It's not that your man isn't strong enough. It's just that my opponent is too strong. So I can only endure this humiliation. Qin Yu looked at Zhou Pei, who was forcing a smile. But in truth his heart was dripping blood. To tell the truth, he felt a bit awkward. He wondered if he had been too ruthless. He wanted to tell Zhou Pei that he was being serious and that he had no intention of continuing to extort him. But looking at Zhou Pei's twitching eyebrows and lips, Qin Yu suspected that if he refused again, Zhou Pei might think even more and take out even more things to survive. With a light cough, Qin Yu restrained his expression. He thought to himself that Zhou Pei was willing to do this, but it had nothing to do with him. He turned and said, "Since fellow Taoist, Zhou Pei is so sincere in giving it to me, then accept it." Xiang Shui beamed with joy. Women, no matter how old they were, didn't have the least bit of resistance when it came to beauty. She took the 2 bottles of snow toad cream and sweetly bowed to Zhou Pei. "Then this servant will thank Mr. Zhou in advance." Zhou Pei repeatedly said, "Of course, of course." He moved to the side, avoiding her bow. This woman was the hardest to deal with. If he were to casually accept her bow now, he would surely bear a grudge. "Qin, you didn't bother with this person anymore." He stepped forwards and cupped his hands together. "Miss East Zhou, it's been a long time since we last met. I wonder how you have been recently?" East Zhou, Jilly deeply looked at him. "The Myriad Soul Tao is about to open, and I am fortunate enough to participate. I will be competing with many proud children of heaven, so I am feeling a deep sense of apprehension." Qin Yu smiled. "Oh, if that's the case, I wonder if I can lend Miss East Zhou a helping hand. I am also a bit interested in the Myriad Soul Tao." East Zhou Jilly's eyes brightened. "You are most welcome." She could no longer conceal the joy in her heart. A bright smile bloomed on her face. "Qin Yu, you have already agreed. You cannot go back on your word. A gentleman's word cannot be taken back." East Zhou, Jilly turned and said, "Brother Shang, Qin Yu, and you will both become my companions when I enter the Myriad Soul Tao. I wonder if you can give me face and let bygones be bygones?" Shang Lingyue's eyes darkened. He looked at Qin Yu. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, "Since Miss East Zhou has spoken, I will let bygones be bygones." He cupped his hands together. "Fellow Taoist Qin Yu, I am Shang Lingyue. I hope that we can work together and help Miss East Zhou obtain some harvests." Qin Yu cupped his hands together. Of course. Like this, the storm subsided. Although it was a bit sudden, it was also reasonable. Although he had lost some face, no one would laugh at Shang Lingyue. Rather, they gave him a thumbs up. He came from a noble background and was powerful. Yet he was able to discard unnecessary face and was able to put it down. He was quite the character. After all, even though no one knew Qin Yu's true origins, it was already certain that he had a great background. To form enmity with such a character for some unnecessary reasons wasn't the right choice. East Zhou Jilly smiled in satisfaction. "Today, I will set up another banquet to congratulate you too on your friendship and also to welcome Qin Yu." Things proceeded more smoothly than planned. Qin Yu boarded a carriage and entered the East Zhou clan, and at this time, news of him appearing here had already spread to all sides. The East Zhou clan immediately sent out feelers to confirm Qin Yu's identity. He was indeed the one who had caused such a stir in the God-forgetting gorge. This was clearly a good thing. With the clan's preparations and Qin Yu's participation, East Zhou Jelly's chances of success would be much higher. It was just that they still couldn't clearly investigate Qin Yu's background. This became the only doubt in the hearts of the East Zhou clan's high-level figures. The Myriad Soul Tao was an extremely important matter, and no accidents could be allowed. No matter how careful they were, it wouldn't be too excessive. Moreover, in their opinion, the appearance of Qin Yu and his servant was too much of a coincidence. It was as if they had come specifically for East Jili. However, based on the rumors, they didn't seem to have any reason to do so. This matter taught them that boasting too much and being too successful was not necessarily a good thing. Go tell Fourth Miss that after the banquet ends, she can come here. Yes, the banquet proceeded smoothly. Even Shang Junjun had to squeeze out a smile, even though that smile was uglier than crying. She still couldn't accept the fact that Qin Yu was Qin Yu. Looking at that calm face in the hall, even though her teeth itched with hatred, she could only endure it. Even her elder brother wasn't willing to rashly become enemies with him. What could she do? Although Shang Lingyue doted on her, she had to be smart herself. If she fanned the flames and made her elder brother become enemies with Qin Yu, she would truly be stupid. Divine Dr. Yi accompanied her in the hall. His eyes constantly fell on Qin Yu, full of surprise. This boy, he originally thought that he had overestimated him, but he didn't expect that he would be wrong. He still couldn't imagine that the person he had been searching for was actually that extremely weak junior from back then. But there was one thing he could be sure of. With Qin Yu's help, the chances of success would be much higher. This boy was simply the lucky star of the young miss. He was like that back then, and he was still like that now. Thinking about it, with Qin Yu's current status and his powerful and mysterious background, if possible, he could indeed consider for the young miss. If she succeeded and obtained Qin Yu's support, the young miss's position in the clan would truly be as stable as Mount Tai. With this thought, Divine Dr. Ye's eyes gradually brightened. The host and guest were both happy. Shang Lingyue and Qin Yu smiled at each other. Then they drank the wine in their cups and bid their farewells. Eastern Zhou Chali didn't give Divine Dr. Yi a chance to nag about her marriage. After listening to the maid beside her say a few words, she gave some instructions and then left. The Eastern Zhou clan ruled over 100 worlds. Since ancient times, they had been a powerful and influential clan that had existed for hundreds of thousands of years. The clan prospered and flourished, and the number of clansmen was incalculable. Only those with outstanding talent would be recognized by the main sect and receive resources from the clan to be trained. Eastern Zhou Chali was the fourth of her generation to be chosen by the clan. Before her, there were 3 people, and after that there were even more. Generally speaking, there were at least dozens of them. Any one of them had a chance of standing out from the crowd. Although Eastern Zhou Chali had her father's shadow and she herself was outstanding enough, in order to obtain her current status, she had experienced countless storms. Even today, when she obtained the qualifications to enter the Myriad Soul Dao, there were still countless people waiting for an accident to occur so that they could replace her. I am Jiali. I am here to pay my respects to the patriarchs. Standing in the grand hall, she bowed respectfully to everyone. Fourth Miss, you should be clear as to why I summoned you here today. How did you meet this Qin Yu? An elder slowly said from a high position. Eastern Zhou Chali said, Qin Yu and I met not too long ago, in the process of competing for a spot to enter the Myriad Soul Dao. She didn't hesitate at all. She recounted everything that had happened that involved Qin Yu, not concealing anything at all. She had a clearer understanding of her family's strength than anyone else. She naturally understood that trying to hide anything now was foolish to the extreme. The hall was quiet. The people that controlled the colossus that was the Eastern Zhou clan were all quietly listening, their own thoughts running through their minds. That is what happened. When I saw Qin Yu again today, I was also shocked. I never imagined that the Qin Yu in the god Sealing Gorge would be him. The moment her voice fell, a cold and gloomy voice sounded out. Fourth Miss, are you saying that not too long ago, in the competition for spots, the Qin Yu you met was still extremely ordinary? Eastern Zhou Chali nodded. Yes. Do you think it is possible that he deliberately disguised himself and hid his strength? Eastern Zhou Chali hesitated for a moment. I don't think so. At that time, Old Yi was with me. His eyesight shouldn't be wrong. The cold and gloomy voice continued. In other words, in a short period of time, Qin Yu seems to have changed into a completely different person. His strength has risen to a level that even you are shocked by. Eastern Zhou Chali nodded, her heart sinking. Everyone, I think this matter is inappropriate. The master of the cold and gloomy voice was an extremely powerful elder of the Eastern Zhou clan, Eastern Zhou Anhuo. His words naturally carried great weight. There are two possibilities for Qin Yu's sudden rise in strength. The first is that he has obtained an inconceivable good fortune during this period of time, thus benefiting from it. But the possibility of this is infinitesimally small. At the very least, I do not believe that there is a lucky chance in this world that can help a cultivator be reborn in such a short period of time, unless the Qin Yu of today is no longer the person that Eastern Zhou Chali knew. The hall fell silent. Many elders frowned, a dignified look in their eyes. Because this wasn't impossible. Something like seizing someone's body was said to be mysterious and mystical. But with their status and experience, it wasn't anything at all. If Qin Yu's body had really been seized by someone, then his motives for coming to the Eastern Zhou clan were inevitably impure. Eastern Zhou Chali took a deep breath. I admit that the possibility that Elder speaks of does exist, but I believe that the Qin Yu of today is the Qin Yu of the past. Humph! How much do you know about seizing someone's body? How many have you seen? Even if you disguise yourself exactly the same, even if your soul aura is the same, that is normal. Eastern Zhou Anhuo sneered. The myriad soul Tao is not a matter that concerns you alone. The clan has spent an astonishing amount of resources in order to obtain this spot. So how can we allow any accidents to occur? He cupped his hands together. Patriarch, in my opinion, we must thoroughly confirm Qin Yu's identity. Otherwise, we cannot allow him to follow us in. Elder Anhuo's words are reasonable. There is nothing wrong with being more cautious. The origins of this master and servant pair are indeed mysterious, and there are suspicious points everywhere. We must thoroughly investigate this matter. Of course. Eastern Zhou Chali's heart sank. She looked up at the elders that were on good terms with her father, hoping to obtain their support. Cough! An elder coughed and said, although Elder Anhuo's words are reasonable, do not forget that Qin Yu is not an ordinary cultivator that is trying to obtain a spot to follow. His eyes swept around. To put it bluntly, to other cultivators, those that crazily chase after others and pay any price to obtain a spot to follow are nothing at all in front of Qin Yu. As long as he is willing, he can casually leak out some information, and he can immediately harvest countless olive branches thrown at him. In addition to generous rewards, this isn't an impossibility. If because of our suspicions, Qin Yu becomes a follower of other seed cultivators of the myriad soul Tao, and then we vent our anger on the fourth miss, just how many harvests do you think our Eastern Zhou clan will have left? Everyone, do not forget that not only did he solve the 99th question of the rules several times, but he even caused the god confining gorge to vanish from sight. If such an opponent enters the myriad soul Tao, just how terrifying will his destructive power and deterrence be? The hall fell silent. Those that expressed their support for Eastern Zhou Anhuo frowned and shut their mouths. The matter of the myriad soul Tao was truly too important. They could wave the flag and cheer, but they couldn't charge to the front. If they really stirred up trouble, the consequences would be unbearable even for them. Eastern Zhou Anhuo coldly sneered. Elder Anhuo's meaning is that our Eastern Zhou clan can only ignore this matter? Eastern Zhou Anhuo lightly said, I have no such intentions, but we must treat Qin Yu with caution. We cannot become enemies with him. Both sides stuck to their own arguments, and each had their own reasons. Finally, the patriarch made a judgment. Qin Yu's identity had to be confirmed, but it had to be done in a gentle manner so that he wouldn't feel any disgust. Both sides reluctantly accepted this result. So, How to confirm Qinyu's identity became the difficult problem at hand. That night, Eastern Zhou, Charlie, knocked on the door to Qinyu's courtyard. Under Xiang Shue's respectful but somewhat strange gaze, she entered the room to speak with him. Looking at the closed door, Xiang Shue curled her lips. She felt a bit of a headache. This brat Qinyu's ability to attract bees and butterflies was far too strong. Eastern Zhou Chali had once been an incomparably powerful goddess that had descended to the world, but now she had come knocking on her door in the middle of the night. This would inevitably increase the difficulty and risk of her plan of borrowing seeds. Ignoring Xiang Shue's wild thoughts, Eastern Zhou Chali entered and sat down. After a moment of hesitation, she directly said, "Qinyu, what I'm about to say might make you feel ashamed and angry, but I have no other choice. I hope you can understand." Qinyu glanced at her. "Because of my background." Eastern Zhou Chali's eyes brightened. With his intelligence, he had directly grasped the crux of the matter. "Yes, the elders of my clan are unable to completely rest assured about your status." Qinyu bitterly smiled. When he had Xiang Shue speak up to help him, she had boasted that he had a high and mighty background. This was all in order to deal with the test of the Eastern Zhou clan itself. However, he had never imagined that things would develop to such a state. Now, almost everyone believed that he had a great background. But Eastern Zhou Chali actually knew his true origins. It hadn't been too long since they parted ways. His status had changed far too much, so it would be strange if the Eastern Zhou clan didn't suspect him. But no matter how difficult it was to boast, he had to continue raising it. Otherwise, if it died, he would have to find another way to enter the myriad soul Dao. But without a doubt, Eastern Zhou Chali was his best choice. Moreover, he didn't have enough time to obtain another spot to follow. And even if he did, wouldn't they investigate why he left the Eastern Zhou clan? There would clearly be problems. In truth, he certainly couldn't say it, otherwise Eastern Zhou Chali might not dare to join forces with him and deceive the entire clan. Qinyu apologized inwardly. He bitterly smiled. "I'm sorry. Because of certain reasons, without teacher's permission, I cannot announce my status to the outside world." Eastern Zhou Chali frowned. "You really can't say it?" "I can't," Qinyu decisively replied. He certainly knew that he couldn't hesitate at this time. "Miss Eastern Zhou, I can honestly tell you that I do have some personal reasons for wanting to enter the inheritance of the myriad soul Dao. But towards you, I don't have the slightest bit of malice." Eastern Zhou Chali lightly sighed. "I believe you, but the clan isn't willing to take any risks." She hesitated. She stood up and said, "The Eastern Zhou clan will definitely use other methods to investigate your origins. If I have offended you in any way, I hope you can forgive me. But please rest assured that I will do my best to have the clan agree to let you become my follower." Qinyu sent her away. After Xiang Shue closed the courtyard doors, she blinked her eyes. "What is it? Your complexion seems a bit heavy." Qinyu rubbed his temples. "It's nothing." Xiang Shue had acted according to his wishes. Now that there was a problem, he couldn't blame her. If he said it, it would only make her feel pressure. Why bother? Qinyu looked down at his palm, a thoughtful look in his eyes. He wondered if the status of an original god disciple could be considered heaven-span. Chapter 998. Cough, cough. This could only be considered a helpless self-deprecation. To the Eastern Zhou clan that controlled 100 worlds, although origin divinities were precious, they couldn't be considered a heavyweight. It was impossible to gather as many as dogs, but pulling out 100 people was a simple matter. It seemed that the possibility of relying on Shuezheng to pass was nearly negligible. Qinyu was a bit annoyed. He really didn't like this feeling of helplessness and helplessness. But now there didn't seem to be a better method. Even if he went to find a teacher that could pierce through the heavens, he wouldn't be able to make it in time. As Qinyu was feeling annoyed, the colossus that was the Eastern Zhou clan had already begun to operate. With its size, it could easily erupt with an unimaginable amount of energy. To determine Qin Yu's background, if he didn't want to say anything and they couldn't find any other information, was there any other method? To the average person, this was clearly an impasse. But the Eastern Zhou clan was different, so they had a method. The great divination art was an extremely mysterious, supernatural ability. According to the karma of the heavens and earth, it could deduce the past and future. Calling it a supernatural ability wasn't too appropriate. This was because its operating principles were nonsense in the eyes of supreme beings. There was no reason to speak of it. Accurately predicting the past and future wasn't reliable at all. But if it was used to determine someone's background, then its credibility was extremely high. After all, as long as one had a great background or an astonishing origin, their aura would inevitably be entangled and they would have a noble and condescending aura. One couldn't casually touch them, otherwise they would suffer a backlash. To put it simply, even if the person you wanted to probe wasn't too terrifying, their aura would fuse together and they would share weal and woe with them. Behind them were people like family, teachers, friends, and so on. As long as the relationship between the two parties was close enough, once you touched their aura, you would be sensed and suffer their anger. So, this in itself was a risky matter. The Eastern Zhou clan had found an extremely strong grandmaster. This grandmaster wasn't even the least bit mocking. He had been famous for a long time and had stood there until now. For his fame to spread far and wide, he naturally had a glorious record that was praised by others. This sort of grandmaster had a transcendent status. Even with the Eastern Zhou clan strength, they wouldn't easily force him. This time, if it weren't for the Eastern Zhou family clan having something to ask of them, there was no way they would have agreed to use the great divination art on Qin Yu. After all, he had solved the 99th question consecutively and even caused the god confining gorge to suddenly disappear. These were all things that could be seen by everyone. Not to mention, according to the rumors, he had an incomparably terrifying background, and his teacher was a supreme existence. Daring to use the word heavenly to describe him, how could he be an ordinary character? If he was unlucky, he might lose his life because of this. Master Zhou Bai's face was livid, his eyes spitting fire, taking advantage of a burning house. Your Eastern Zhou clan's actions are akin to looting a burning house. Looking at his embarrassed and angry expression, it seemed that he would slam the door and leave at any time. But after a few moments of hesitation, he decided to stay. This old man can give this matter a try. However, I will only carry out the most superficial level of divination. If anything goes wrong, I will immediately stop. If you agree, you will need to pay me a sufficiently satisfactory reward. Do not think that I am trying to rip you off. This is what I deserve for risking my life. Across from him, an Eastern Zhou family clan elder smiled. Of course, everything will be as you say. Moreover, Grandmaster Zhou, please rest assured that our Eastern Zhou family's reward will definitely satisfy you. He gestured with his hand. I believe that Grandmaster also knows the reason why we are doing this. So, if Grandmaster Zhou has no other opinions, then let us begin as soon as possible. Moreover, regarding this matter, no matter what the final result is, please keep it a secret. Zhou Bai flicked his sleeves and coldly coughed. Don't worry. I still have this bit of professional integrity. Otherwise, I wouldn't have lived to this day. Although the Eastern Zhou family clan had agreed to all of his requests and would definitely give him a satisfactory reward, there was still no smile on Grandmaster Zhou's face. Rather, it became increasingly ugly. He really did feel restless about this matter. He had done similar things several times before, and most of the targets had some background. One of them was even a cultivator with an inheritance from some hidden land. He had suffered some injuries, but Grandmaster Zhou had barely managed to escape unscathed, but this time he felt that something was wrong. As a cultivator who had grasped the mysterious great prophecy art, he had great faith in his own divine senses. This Qin Yu was absolutely not ordinary. If he made a single mistake, he feared he would die here today. following behind the Eastern Zhou family elder. Grandmaster Zhou felt restless. As time passed, he grew stronger and stronger. There were several times when he wanted to turn around and leave, but there was indeed something he needed the Eastern Zhou family clan's help with, so he could only endure it. Moments later, in a hidden hall, all of the upper echelons of the Eastern Zhou family clan gathered. In the center was an altar that had already been constructed. This altar was pure black and seemed to be made from some sort of black jade without any impurities. Looking at it, one could only feel a bottomless darkness, as if one's gaze would be sucked in. As Zhou Bai saw this altar, his tense heart relaxed a little. As expected of the Eastern Zhou family clan, they were truly worthy of being a giant-level existence. With this prophecy altar constructed from the starry sea-black jade, he would be much more relaxed. Even if some accident occurred with the altar as a shield, it would be much easier for him to leave. Taking a deep breath, Grandmaster Zhou stood still. He cupped his hands together and said, "Zhou Bai greets the Eastern Zhou family head." With his status, even when facing the Eastern Zhou family elders, he could treat them as equals. In fact, his status was even higher. The only ones he needed to greet on his own initiative were those who held the highest authority in the Eastern Zhou family. After all, it was rumored that this Eastern Zhou family head had lived for many years and hadn't fought for a very, very long time. His strength had already reached an inconceivable boundary. If he could transform himself and take another step forward, the strength of the Eastern Zhou family head would experience a qualitative leap. Standing in front of him now and feeling the undetectable aura of the primal chaos, Grandmaster Zhou became increasingly sure of this. Naturally, he was respectful. The Eastern Zhou family head nodded. I'll have to trouble Mr. Zhou." The space around him was constantly in a state of slight distortion, wrapping around his entire body. It was impossible to see his true appearance. Even his eyes seemed strange and twisted. They seemed close, but also seemed to come from the endless distance. From these words, Zhou Bai could feel an unquestionable firmness. His heart sank, and then a bitter taste rose in his mouth. He took a deep breath and bowed. "I will do my best." Even when facing the elders of the Eastern Zhou clan, he still dared to negotiate terms and put on airs. But against this person, forget it. Making a move might not necessarily result in death, but going against his will would surely result in one's soul dissipating. Of this, Grandmaster Zhou had no doubts whatsoever. His figure flickered, and Zhou Bai landed on the altar. After a moment of hesitation, he lifted his palm. Light surged, and a tortoise shell appeared. This tortoise shell was the size of an adult's palm. Its surface was covered with deep veins and patterns, each one filled with the aura of endless years. It was clear that it had existed for countless years. With a thought, the tortoise shell flew up on its own and landed on top of Zhou Bai's head. The patterns on its surface lit up and beams of light fell down, weaving together to form a giant tortoise shell projection that covered him within. This appearance from afar was like a person wearing a giant tortoise shell, or perhaps a giant tortoise had cultivated into a human form. But right now, in this hidden hall, no one would find this strange or funny, because they had long heard of the Luo River god tortoiseshell. It was a treasure that Zhou Bai rarely used since he became famous. Now he had not even used the great divination art and had already summoned the tortoise shell. It was clear that he was serious. After a short pause in the silent hall, Zhou Bai's calm and deep voice sounded out. No one could understand what he meant. At the same time, his body began to move. It was similar to the strange dance steps recorded in ancient records of tribes in ancient times dancing around a bonfire in the middle of the night. But right now, the strange voice and the strange dance steps, when combined together, gave off an oppressive feeling. It was as if the space in this hall, under the influence of some unknown power, had become viscous, as if it was about to solidify. Every time he took a breath, he had to expend a great deal of energy. Moreover, he could clearly feel that when the viscous air passed through his trachea and entered his lungs, it produced a difficult friction feeling. There was even a slight burning and slightly prickling sensation. The interior of the altar made from star sea ink jade was pure black, like an endless abyss. But right now, in this abyss, dots of light slowly lit up. The light they emitted wasn't very intense, but there were a lot of them. One after another, they floated up into the air, as if they were trying to copy the boundless starry sky above their heads into the altar, not a single one of which was missing. Therefore, the entire altar gradually began to release a vast and majestic aura, the aura of time almost condensed into a tangible form. As Zhou Bai spat out the last syllable, his feet coincided perfectly with the last step of the dance. Hum! Above his head, the Luo River, tortoiseshell, trembled. The countless beams of light that fell down began to move in a rhythmic rhythm. They were like ripples in the water, like weeds that tumbled about without a trace. Yet they gave off an incomparably profound and mysterious feeling. It was like these fluctuating beams of light contained some great secret between the heavens and earth. It gave off a feeling that once they were unraveled, they could see the true world. Zhou Bai looked up. Starry rivers sparkled in his eyes, as if the process of the altar copying the starry sky was also projected into his eyes. Thus, at this time, his eyes were no longer ordinary. They were the incarnation of the starry sea in the vault of heaven, covering the entire world. Naturally, he could find all traces of the past and future of this world. At this time, he would search for the source of Qin Yu's aura, tracing it back to determine just what sort of divine being he was. It had begun. In a corner of the hall, Eastern Zhou Jolly clenched her fists. Because this matter involved her, she was allowed to watch from the sidelines. But she had no ability to interfere with the entire process. She could only silently wait for the final result to appear. Qin Yu, you mustn't disappoint me. Within the starry sea-black jade altar, the countless motes of light began to slowly revolve. As they revolved, the starry sky projection that appeared in Zhou Bai's eyes also began to revolve. The great divination art revolved. He had already locked onto the thread of karma that represented Qin Yu and was tracing it back to its source. At almost the same time, within the Eastern Zhou family's encampment in a courtyard, Qin Yu's eyes flashed open, his eyebrows tightly furrowed together. Within his soul space, the blue sun and purple moon revolved. The sun and moon force field they produced began to violently shake, as if an invisible strength was trying to break through its blockade. Qin Yu instantly understood. In order to determine his identity, the Eastern Zhou family had begun to make a move. With the sun and moon force field wrapped around him, he had jumped out of the world, no longer within the 5 elements and yin and yang of the world. Unless the other party was powerful enough to surpass the level of this world, it was impossible for them to continue spying on him. His thoughts raced. Suddenly, a thought appeared in Qin Yu's mind. He wondered if the jade embryo egg that had fused into his body could be sensed. By relying on this, he might be able to gain the trust of the Eastern Zhou family. Otherwise, if he kept them outside the door, that would only arouse more suspicion. The jade embryo egg was one of the great secrets of Qin Yu's body that no one else could know about. If it was truly discovered, it would inevitably cause a storm of blood, so this matter itself was extremely risky. If he wasn't careful, there would be a great mess. But Qin Yu had underestimated the cultivators of the world. Or it could be said that he didn't know that there was a reason why the great divination art was so unbelievable in the eyes of supreme beings. The sun and moon force field had indeed blocked the unknown spying from the outside, but it hadn't disappeared because of this. Rather, it had fused together with the sun and moon force field. Of course, this was only a saying. To be more precise, the fluctuations of strength had synchronized with the sun and moon force field. Thus, it was still blocked outside. But in Qin Yu's senses, his defenses had already failed. This was because the feeling of being spied on had become even more intense. It was like traces of a cold and gloomy aura were constantly passing through his flesh and spreading deep into his body. They were truly worthy of being a giant-level Eastern Zhou family. They had actually managed to find such a mysterious and mystical method. At this time, the jade embryo egg that had fused into his body seemed to sense something. With a humming sound, it began to gently tremble. Qin Yu's complexion changed. He wanted to stop it, but it was too late. He subconsciously tensed his body. He didn't know whether this change was good or bad. But considering these things now was clearly meaningless. He could only suppress his thoughts and wait for the changes to occur. As Qin Yu was feeling nervous, he didn't know just what sort of astonishing change had occurred because of the jade embryo eggs trembling. In a hidden hall, Zhou Bai stood atop the altar, the river tortoiseshell atop his head. His aura was faintly discernible, and his eyes were filled with a sea of stars. Suddenly his eyes widened. The sea of stars in his eyes began to rapidly spin, and his body shivered, as if he were withstanding the weight of tens of thousands of soldiers. Kacha! Kacha! The surface of the starry black jade altar suddenly shattered like ice. Cracks began to appear, weaving together like a dense spider web. There were loud gasps in the hall. Although everyone had guessed this, if the rumors were true, then Qin Yu did indeed have a great background. But now, this background seemed to be even more terrifying than they had imagined. Although the great divination art was mysterious and unfathomable, with everyone's status, they had heard of it before and had a general understanding of it. Now, the great divination art had just been used. In other words, it had only probed the most superficial information about Qin Yu, but it had already triggered a backlash that the starry black jade altar couldn't withstand. They were well aware of what this meant. Qin Yu's background was likely far more terrifying than the rumors made it out to be. In fact, at this step, there was no longer anything worth doubting about Qin Yu's background. With such a background, there was no need for him to personally take such a risk to deal with Eastern Zhou Jali or the Eastern Zhou family clan. Zhou Bai took a deep breath. He was about to stop the great divination art, but at this time the silent Eastern Zhou patriarch suddenly said, "Continue." His voice was calm, but there was a cold determination in his words, like a towering divine mountain that couldn't be shaken. Zhou Bai's eyes revealed a hint of hesitation, but time wouldn't stop. As he hesitated, the great divination art continued. Thus, it began to resist the suppression and probe the deeper source of Qin Yu's aura. Infinitely far away, within a grand hall, the person sitting on the throne suddenly opened his eyes. Thunder flashed within them, carrying with it a world-destroying might. Insolence! A deep roar exploded out like a thunderclap. Waves of sound billowed out, and an invisible aura fused into the world. Within the invisible aura, it was as if the sea was enraged, and in an instant huge waves were set off. Billions of seawater poured into the river, and with a roar, it flowed against the current. Bang! The starry black jade altar seemed to suffer a heavy blow. The number of cracks on its surface suddenly increased by over 100 times. Zhou Bai spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes widened. The starry sky projection fell into chaos, shaking as if it would shatter at any moment. This aura, the Eastern Zhou patriarch's eyes brightened. He took a step forwards and appeared in the skies above the starry black jade altar. He lifted a hand and pressed down. Bang! A boundless strength surged out from nothingness, suppressing the entire world and imprisoning all within. The strongest under a ruler. There was no way he would be wrong about this aura. This was because he himself was infinitely close to this boundary. If he had a lucky chance and took another step forwards, he would be able to succeed. At that time, the Eastern Zhou patriarch would be able to take another step forwards and become a super-existence comparable to a holy land. Zhou Bai paled. "Thank you, patriarch, for saving me." He was sure that if it weren't for the patriarch's intervention, even if he didn't die, he would have shed off dozens of layers of skin. The Eastern Zhou patriarch had no expression. "There is no need to thank me. because I want you to continue." Zhou Bai's body shook and his eyes widened. The gratitude that had just appeared in his heart instantly vanished. If it weren't for the fact that he knew that if he cursed out loud, he would die a miserable death, he was sure he would have jumped thousands of feet and cursed the heavens and earth. With things having reached this step, it was clear that this Qin Yu's background was so great that it left one in despair. I only sensed a little bit, and I didn't have any ill intentions towards him, but I still ended up in this situation. If I continued, what was the difference between that and seeking death? The Eastern Zhou patriarch lightly said, "I know what you are thinking in your heart, but there is still a difference. For instance, if you continue with my protection, you might not die. But if you refuse, I can guarantee that you will die right now. If you don't believe me, you can try." Zhou Bai gulped. With the status of the Eastern Zhou patriarch, there was no doubt in his words. He clenched his teeth and suddenly shouted out loud. The river tortoise shell above his head emitted loud cracking sounds before it shattered into countless pieces. In the next moment, an incomparably vast aura poured into Zhou Bai's body from above, causing his eyes to violently shake. It seemed as if the shattered starry sea diagram would completely stabilize at any moment. Rumble, rumble. Pushed by this strength, his eyes continued forwards, probing into Qin Yu's deeper secrets. Suddenly, the entire hall fell silent. All sound vanished. Everyone remained in the same position as a moment ago, as if they had been frozen in the air. Within the shattered starry sea black jade altar, a blurry figure appeared in the starry sea diagram. Perhaps it was because the altar was broken, but her figure was blurry and indistinct. In the next moment, this figure opened her eyes. No one could describe the beauty of these eyes, because they seemed to represent the vast and boundless world. Chapter 999. Ruler. The Eastern Zhou patriarch cried out loud. He didn't dare to hesitate at all. The aura within his body erupted like a volcano. Images of mountains and rivers appeared from the void, wrapping around him. It made the Eastern Zhou patriarch seem like the ruler of this vast world. But in the next moment, the illusory world suddenly trembled, and then a terrifying crack silently appeared on it. From one end to the other, it passed through the entire world phantom. It carried with it a cold and ruthless will that couldn't be resisted, splitting it in half. From between the Eastern Zhou patriarch's eyebrows, there was a loud popping sound. Blood instantly flowed out and fell into his eyes, causing them to turn crimson red. Then his entire face was drenched in blood, making him look extremely distressed. The Eastern Zhou patriarch was infinitely close to having the strongest cultivation below the ruler level. His mortal body was incomparably lively, let alone a single wound. Even if his entire body was cut in half, it would immediately regenerate. Even if most of his body was destroyed to ashes, he would be able to quickly regenerate and restore his mortal body. But this wound between his eyebrows was different. Even with his cultivation, he couldn't repair it. Because of the shock in his heart, the Eastern Zhou patriarch blurted out the identity of this phantom that appeared within the black jade altar in the sea of stars. Ruler. These two simple words seemed to carry a heavy weight that fell into everyone's hearts, causing them to subconsciously hold their breaths. Even their heartbeats seemed to stop because of this. The world was vast and boundless. There were tens of thousands of worlds scattered in all directions. There were trillions upon trillions of living beings that together formed this boundless world. Of all these cultivators that stepped onto the road of cultivation and constantly transformed themselves, climbing to the peak of the great Tao, only those that reached the peak had the qualifications to be called rulers. What was a ruler? To put it simply, it was to control a part of the world, to be the faith of trillions of living beings. With a single thought, the world would change color. With a single killing intent, rivers of blood would flow, raising a hand to overturn yin and yang, and with a single step to destroy the world. This was a ruler. This was an existence that surpassed holy lands. This was an existence that could truly use the tens of thousands of worlds as a chessboard. This was an unsurpassed existence that could compete for supremacy between the heavens and earth. Compared to this, the insignificant Eastern Zhou family was nothing more than an ant beneath the foot of a giant. Although they were relatively stronger, a single finger could crush them into powder. This was a disparity in strength that surpassed the limits of what words could describe. The hall was deathly silent as the bodies of everyone stiffened like iron. Their foreheads and backs were covered in sweat, while terror assaulted their minds like a tide. A sovereign. It was a sovereign. Even though the rumors had mentioned that Qin Yu had a teacher whose strength reached the heavens, no one would consider him as a ruler. It was because this was already not only reaching the heavens, but also standing above the heavens, overlooking the myriad of worlds. In other words, when Qin Yu expressed his opinion before, he had been very modest. It was just that they hadn't been able to understand it. But now what they wanted to say was, "Since you have such a background, why are you being so modest and asking us to court death? If we were to be more direct, we wouldn't dare to do that even if we were to reveal a little bit of information." Ruler, that was a supreme ruler. Perhaps because of today's seemingly insignificant matter, the entire Eastern Zhou clan was about to be annihilated. This was because the sovereign's dignity did not allow for the slightest provocation. This was the cruelty of the world. Everyone had to pay the corresponding price for the mistakes they made. Eastern Zhou's Jia Li was one of those shocked. She could still hear the patriarch's words echoing in her ears. Sovereign. Sovereign with the patriarch's cultivation. He certainly wouldn't make a mistake in his judgment. In other words, because of the Eastern Zhou clan's actions today, they had alarmed some terrifying existence that reigned above the myriad of worlds. She had opened her eyes. Without doing anything, she had already severely wounded the patriarch. If she really did do something, perhaps all she had to do was wave her hand, and everyone in this hall would be annihilated in body and soul. Then the entire Eastern Zhou clan would become an existence that existed only in name. They were destined to be completely destroyed and divided up. No wonder Qin Yu said that because of certain reasons he couldn't reveal his teacher's identity before obtaining permission. Regarding this, Eastern Zhou's Jia Li had once heard that because of the sovereign status, he was involved in the great karma of the world. Once one became his disciple, they would naturally become a part of this karma. But as mentioned before, this karma was far too great. If one didn't have enough strength and rashly entered it, they would only be harmed instead. Their lucky chances in life would be reduced, and they might even die. Thus, every sovereign's disciple had to undergo numerous tests. Only after obtaining permission could they be officially recognized. So, Qin Yu had already vaguely given her a reminder. But how could she possibly think that this matter came from the sovereign level? Moreover, before this, she had only vaguely heard some information from the high-level figures of the Eastern Zhou clan. She didn't dare to confirm it herself. But speaking of this, now was clearly too late. The sovereign had already been alarmed. The survival of the Eastern Zhou clan could be decided with a single thought. If there really was a medicine for regret in this world, Eastern Zhou's Jia Li believed that everyone present would want to buy a jar and crazily eat it. Everything was fine, so why did they have to seek death? Eastern Zhou's Jia Li bitterly smiled. Regarding all of this, there was nothing she could do. Speaking of medicine for regret, the one who felt the most regret right now was the Eastern Zhou clan leader, a super powerhouse who had lived for countless years. That's right, this super powerhouse lived up to his name. There was absolutely no deliberate mockery or anything like that. However, there was still an enormous gap between the levels of super powerhouses. For example, he was only a hair's breadth away from the strongest below the ruler level. Although it was only a hair's breadth away, the most he could do was exchange a few blows with such an existence before fleeing. But facing a sovereign, it was like the distance between the starry skies and hell. Let alone exchanging a few moves, Just a serious look could kill him. This wasn't an exaggeration, because once one reached the sovereign level, they had already surpassed the limits of what the mortal world could see. They had merged with the heavens and earth. Or, to be more precise, they had become a part of the heavens and earth. They could pluck stars with a wave of their hand. Zhou Bai had done this time and time again. He had been prepared to give up, but he had insisted on continuing, leading to this current situation. If this led to the destruction of the Eastern Zhou clan, he would be the sinner of the entire clan. But who could have known that he had his own reasons for doing this? Because when Zhou Bai peeked into Qin Yu's aura and the altar shook, he felt a strange aura. It was extremely thin, but it caused the Eastern Zhou clan leader's heart to violently beat, as if his entire body would burn up. Although he didn't know where this aura came from, there was one thing he was certain of. It was the breakthrough turning point that the Eastern Zhou clan leader had been waiting for countless years. As long as he could obtain a part of this aura, he was confident he could take another step forward and step into the strongest level beneath the sovereign level. At that time, the entire Eastern Zhou clan would undergo earth-shaking changes because of this. Their strength would rise by over 100 times. Everything I do is for myself, but at the same time, it is also for the entire clan. But just like Eastern Zhou's Jia Li, thinking about this now was meaningless. The Eastern Zhou clan leader's thoughts raced. Suddenly, he grasped a ray of light in the dark night of despair. With the sovereign strength, since she had been alarmed and opened her noble eyes, then she only needed a single glance to kill him. Compared to that, the space between his eyebrows had been ruptured and his soul had been violently shaken. This couldn't be considered much of an injury at all. What did this mean? Although he couldn't be sure, the Eastern Zhou clan leader couldn't let go of this slim chance. He prostrated himself on the ground, displaying his most respectful attitude. Respected and unsurpassed great sovereign, the Eastern Zhou clan has enraged you because of our ignorance. We are willing to offer you a sufficient price to appease your anger. I hope that the great sovereign can forgive our ignorance. Within the starry sea-ink jade altar, the phantom that had appeared had been silent ever since she opened her eyes. After hearing this, she didn't say anything. Just like when she first appeared, she vanished without a trace. The terrifying pressure that filled the hall, covering everything, vanished along with it, as if everything that had happened just now had been an illusion. Within the hall, all of the Eastern Zhou clan leaders let out a collective breath. Their breaths superimposed upon each other, forming a shockwave of air. Perhaps one person would hallucinate during the day, but for dozens of them this was clearly impossible. The Eastern Zhou clan leader stood up from the ground. He lifted his hand and wiped away the blood on his face. The wound between his eyebrows had barely healed, but there was still a red line that remained, like a temporarily closed third eye. Rumble, rumble. The entire altar completely shattered and collapsed. The starry sea-ink jade that was known as incomparably hard was crushed into endless powder as it tumbled about. This was because there was nothing in this world that could withstand the terrifying attack of a sovereign's aura when he descended. To touch, it was certain to be destroyed. Zhou Bai had already fainted. He lay on the ground, gasping for air. But since he hadn't died, the Eastern Zhou clan's methods would definitely allow him to live. Take Mr. Zhou away and treat him as best as you can. The Eastern Zhou clan leader looked up, his eyes sweeping around. What happened today is the greatest secret of my Eastern Zhou clan. No one can reveal even half a word. Otherwise, I swear on my family's bloodline that I will strip you of your bloodline status and beat you to the ground, never to rise again. Their hearts chilled. All the elders stood up and bowed. Yes, clan leader. No one doubted the truth of the Eastern Zhou clan leader's words, because this matter involved a sovereign existence. Sovereign, this was a sovereign. If they were lucky enough to draw closer to him, that would be an incomparably great help to the entire Eastern Zhou clan. If this matter were to be known by the outside world, they would do everything they could to curry favor with Qin Yu and replace the Eastern Zhou clan's current position. Before this, the Eastern Zhou clan leader had ordered that Zhou Bai be taken away for treatment. This was a form of house arrest. Thinking about it, this Grandmaster Zhou wouldn't appear in front of the world again for a long time. I will be going into seclusion to cultivate. During this time, all matters of the clan will be decided by the Council of Elders. But there is one point. When it comes to Qinyu, the will of the Eastern Zhou clan leader will prevail. No one is allowed to interfere. The Eastern Zhou clan leader looked over. This is your lucky chance, but it is also an opportunity for the clan. I hope that you will grasp it and not disappoint me. His words were filled with deep meaning. Eastern Zhou clan leader Zhu Li respectfully bowed. I will follow the clan leader's orders. I wish the clan leader all the best. I hope that you will gain some benefits from your seclusion and make a breakthrough soon. The Eastern Zhou clan leader smiled. You are very good. He turned and stepped out, vanishing from sight. After facing the sovereign head-on and being injured by his aura, the Eastern Zhou clan leader had actually profited from this disaster and grasped a chance. With this, he might really be able to obtain some harvests and take another step forward in his cultivation. It was because of this that the Eastern Zhou clan leader decided to put down Qinyu and leave everything to the Council of Elders, choosing to immediately go into seclusion. A cultivation opportunity was like a flower in the mirror or a moon in the water. It was right in front of him at this moment. But in the next moment, it might disappear forever. He had waited for countless years and finally grasped this opportunity. How could he allow it to run away from him like this? Eastern Zhou clan leader Zhu Li stood up, a trace of excitement in her eyes. She had guessed right. If she could leave a good impression on the clan leader today, then in the future she would be able to greatly increase her score. Of course, the most important point was that she and Qinyu were old acquaintances. In the eyes of the clan leader, this was the most important matter. Thus, he gave her the highest authority to negotiate with Qinyu. Looking at the faces of the elders, one could see just how envious this was. Eastern Zhou clan leader Zhu Li bowed and said, In the future, I ask the elders to make things more convenient for me. She glanced over at Eastern Zhou clan leader Buhu's gloomy complexion and felt a burst of joy in her heart. This old ghost probably never thought that things would develop to this step. The matter of Qinyu becoming her follower had been settled. This helped her understand that he was an incomparably powerful support. Disciple of a ruler, just this name alone was enough to intimidate all parties. When she faced other competitors within her family, she would have an absolute advantage. But the premise for all of this was that she could thoroughly tie her own interests together with Qinyu, becoming an inseparable whole. A man, if a woman wanted to become an inseparable body of interests, the simplest method was to become Dao companions. Eastern Zhou clan leader Zhu Li subconsciously recalled that old man Yi had once mentioned this matter. Her face flushed red, and she quickly suppressed her thoughts. In the courtyard where Qinyu was, everything was calm and tranquil. His tensed body relaxed. So much time had passed, and there was still no movement from the Eastern Zhou clan. It seemed that no one had discovered the matter of the jade pendant egg. If so, then the worst result would be that the Eastern Zhou clan wouldn't allow him to become Eastern Zhou clan leader Zhu Li's follower. That way, there wouldn't be any danger. But if he was really rejected by the Eastern Zhou clan, how would he enter the myriad souls Dao? Qinyu's relaxed eyebrows furrowed together once more. Thoughts raced through his mind. At this time, there was a knock on the courtyard door. Xiang Shui went out to open it. A moment later, she returned with a strange expression. She placed a pitch-black ring in front of Qinyu. Although it seemed ordinary, it was absolutely precious. This is a gift from the Eastern Zhou clan to you. They only say that it is a reward for you to become Eastern Zhou clan leader Zhu Li's follower. Speaking to hear, Xiang Shui subconsciously gulped and her voice unconsciously lowered. There aren't any spells on the ring. I just took a look. There seems to be a bit too many things inside. In fact, the so-called reward from the Eastern Zhou clan was not only astonishingly high in quantity, but the quality was even more astonishing. This was no longer something that could be described as a simple reward. The reason the Eastern Zhou clan did this was clearly because they hoped that Qin Yu could understand their sincere apology through the thickness of the gift. Qin Yu put down the ring, a strange expression on his face. He subconsciously rubbed his chin, wondering how he had passed this test. Moreover, looking at the current situation, it seemed that even the Eastern Zhou clan was frightened by his background. Otherwise, why would they not hesitate to send him a mountain of treasures as a reward? As Qin Yu was puzzled, he suddenly felt something was wrong. He looked up and saw Xiang Shui staring at him with wide eyes. She was looking at him with a serious expression. "What are you doing?" Xiang Shui earnestly said, "I want to see just how many secrets are hidden beneath that face of yours." She clicked her tongue several times. "I already know what the God Coiling Gorge is. I also know just how sensational what you did was. I originally thought that you were hiding your depths, but compared to what you are doing now, what is the God Coiling Gorge?" The dignified Eastern Zhou clan controls 100 worlds and is said to be a giant-level influence with hundreds of original gods under their command. Now, they are actually apologizing to you. Although they are a bit vague, none of this is important. What is important is that they actually lowered their heads. Xiang Shui took a deep breath and stared at Qin Yu. "Can you tell me just how deep you are hiding yourself? How many secrets do you have that I don't know about? For instance, do you really have a teacher that reaches the heavens?" Qin Yu bitterly smiled. "What are you blabbering on about? My mind is still in a mess, so please don't disturb me." "A teacher that reaches the heavens? Haha, if he really had such a background, why would he need to live such a difficult life? He would have brought out this backer long ago and gone to the peach blossom spring to ask the woman who planted the peach to let Ningling go. If he thought about it like this, having a teacher that reaches the heavens really was a very good thing. Unfortunately, he didn't have one. So, after thinking about it for a while, he went back to doing what he needed to do." Qin Yu rubbed his eyebrows. He glanced at the ring on the table and roughly sorted out the situation he was facing. It was clear that the resistance he was worried about from the Eastern Zhou clan had been resolved for some unknown reason. In other words, the matter of him becoming Eastern Zhou's follower had finally been confirmed. This was the most important thing. Qin Yu smiled. As long as he could enter the myriad souls Tao, he would naturally have a chance to understand its essence and find a way to break it. No matter what, no matter how difficult it was, he had to rescue Ningling from this predestined fate. However, before a follower entered the myriad souls Tao, they would have to sign some sort of contract. Only after obtaining permission would they be able to act on their own. Perhaps before entering, he should speak with Eastern Zhou's Jia Li and have her agree, so that he could obtain the qualifications to act freely as soon as possible. But soon, Qin Yu discovered that all of his worries weren't a problem at all. This was because the Eastern Zhou clan's attitude towards him had undergone a tremendous change. Disciple of a sovereign with such an identity, if he was willing to become a follower of Eastern Zhou's Jia Li, that was the entire Eastern Zhou clan's honor. You want him to abide by an ordinary follower contract? What kind of joke is this? Our Eastern Zhou clan would never do such an unreliable thing. Not only did the contract have to be modified, but it had to be greatly altered. It had to be based on Qin Yu's will until he was satisfied. So, when Eastern Zhou's Jia Li came a second time and brought the contract that Qin Yu needed to sign to become a follower, he subconsciously frowned as he probed it with his divine sense. After several breaths of time, he looked up and asked, "Miss Eastern Zhou, are you sure this is the contract I need to sign?" Eastern Zhou's Jia Li's heart chilled. She slowly said, "Qin Yu, if there is anything you are not satisfied with, you can speak up and I will do my best to adjust it for you." Qin Yu glanced at an Eastern Zhou clan elder sitting on the other side. This person was all smiles. "That's right. Fellow Taoist Qin Yu, Please feel free to speak. My Eastern Zhou clan will definitely satisfy all of your requests." This attitude, it was simply too good. Qin Yu secretly thought to himself, could it be that the Eastern Zhou clan's investigation had deviated and landed on some fierce character? Otherwise, how could they be so scared? But no matter what the reason was, this was at least a good thing for him. The contract in the jade slip, Tizke, he really didn't know how to describe it. If an ignorant cultivator were to look at it, he feared they wouldn't be able to tell who was the follower between Qin Yu and Eastern Zhou's Jiali. He lifted his hand and placed a trace of his divine sense on the jade slip. The surface of the jade slip flashed, indicating that the contract had been signed. Eastern Zhou's Jiali was overjoyed. She stood up and earnestly bowed. "Qin Yu, thank you for being willing to become my follower. After entering the myriad souls Tao, I will leave everything to you." Chapter 1000. News that Qin Yu had become Eastern Zhou Jiali's follower spread out as quickly as possible through various channels. As the only cultivator since ancient times to leave the god-confining gorge with his own strength, and with the myriad soul Tao about to open, he naturally attracted more attention. The surface was calm, but that was only on the surface. Hidden waves were already surging, waiting for the right opportunity to erupt. After all, if they could obtain Qin Yu's approval and pull him to their side, their chances of success would greatly increase after entering the myriad soul Tao. Just this point alone was enough to take a risk and form a relationship with the Eastern Zhou family. It was just that after they obtained this news, they were puzzled. The Eastern Zhou family had always been cautious, so why were they so decisive? Qin Yu's identity and origins were only rumors. No one knew just what was going on. Or could it be said that they already knew Qin Yu's true background? No matter what, the Eastern Zhou family's actions were a clear signal Qin Yu could be used. The contract was signed because the Eastern Zhou family was a step ahead. As long as Qin Yu hadn't entered the myriad soul Tao and was willing to pay a price, the contract could be torn up. The struggle had yet to end. Eastern Zhou Jiali replaced all the servants Qin Yu could contact with absolute confidence of the Eastern Zhou family. She also strictly ordered that no one was allowed to contact Qin Yu without permission. Of course, all of this was done in secret so that he wouldn't be discovered. The reason for this was to avoid the possibility of Qin Yu being roped in by others. After all, in this world there were no absolutes. As long as the dust hadn't settled, anything was possible. Eastern Zhou Jiali believed in Qin Yu, but she didn't want any new waves to appear. After carefully inspecting the area several times and making sure that the outside world was isolated to the greatest extent possible from contacting Qin Yu, Eastern Zhou Jiali made some preparations and invited the 5 followers to gather. The myriad soul Tao was about to open, and they needed to familiarize themselves with each other. At the very least, they needed to know each other's strengths and what they were good at. Only like this could they display their greatest strength as a group. Because they didn't want others to discover them, the Eastern Zhou family paid extra attention to Qin Yu. Besides signing a different contract, he enjoyed the same treatment as the other followers. Eastern Zhou Jiali stood at the entrance to the courtyard. She nodded at Qin Yu, who was walking behind a servant. "You're the only one left." Qin Yu nodded. "I was cultivating just now, so I was a bit delayed. I apologize." Dongzhou Jiali smiled. "Just in time. Let's go in." She turned around and led the way. The servant stood to the side. What happened next was not something he was qualified to participate in. Schwa. In the quiet garden, several pairs of eyes under the octagonal pavilion looked over at the same time. Their gazes were filled with a sense of scrutiny. East Zhou Jiali said, "Everyone, this is fellow Taoist Qin Yu. Because his cultivation was interrupted, he arrived a bit late." She explained. She naturally didn't want any disharmonious elements to appear in the group. "It's fine, we just arrived as well." Shan Lingyue was the first to speak with a smile. Qin Yu nodded towards him. He cupped his hands together and said, "Greetings, fellow Taoists." Everyone returned the gesture. What followed was a simple introduction of their identities. Apart from Qin Yu and Shang Lingyue, the remaining 3 people were a man and 2 women. They didn't look too old. Of course, for successful cultivators, appearance was of no value at all. At the very least, in Qin Yu's opinion, the one closer to him, the one with a delicate appearance and a pure and innocent look in her eyes, was definitely pretending to be young. The aura of time made one feel as if one would choke their throat. It could be said that out of all the cultivators Qin Yu had ever seen, she was the one who had lived the longest. Of course, in normal circumstances, the longer a person lived, the more formidable they would be. The man had a gentle expression and a calm expression. His name was Xia Chun. The woman who was pretending to be young also had a tender name, just like a fairy. The last woman should be a woman, because although she didn't have an Adam's apple, her chest was a bit too flat. Just like her name, she was Taoist priestess typing. That's right, she was a Taoist woman who wore Taoist robes surnamed Yellow and held a horsetail whisk in her hands. Of course, this wasn't just external appearances. If they could obtain the approval of the Dongzhou family clan and become one of East Zhou followers, then their strength couldn't be underestimated. After exchanging a few simple words, they could be considered to have gotten to know each other. Because they had all confirmed that they would become East Zhou followers, they would have to work together to overcome the various dangers of the myriad soul Tao. After letting down their guard, the interaction between them went smoothly. East Zhou said, "The 5 of you will follow me into the myriad soul Tao to compete for the lucky chances of the inheritance. It would be best if you can describe your strength so that we can prepare ahead of time." Her eyes swept over everyone. After a brief pause, she said, "My cultivation is at the 7th level of the divine realm, and I have my family's secret techniques and trump cards. For a short period of time, I can barely contend with a peak divine realm martial artist. In addition, I have some life-saving treasures on me. I will make a list of them so that everyone knows what they are. Before they came here, everyone already knew what they were here for, so they naturally made their own preparations." Not long after East Zhou finished speaking, Shang Lingyue smiled and said, "My cultivation is at the 5th level of the divine realm, and I study the Peach Blossom Springs cultivation method. If I fight with my full strength, I can fight a peak divine realm martial artist. In addition, I have done some research into spells and array formations." Xia Chun, Wan Ruoxian, and Taoist Nun Taiping introduced themselves one after another. Among them, Wan Ruoxian, who was the youngest and the oldest, turned out to be a beast-taming cultivator who seemed to have a powerful beast as a subordinate. Then it was Qin Yu's turn. He paused for a moment and said, "Qin Yu hasn't entered the divine realm yet. If he fights with his full strength, he might be able to fight a peak divine realm martial artist. Besides that, his mortal body is stronger, and he is more sensitive to the fluctuations of the world's rules." In the garden, beneath the exquisite octagonal pavilion, there was a sudden silence. Everyone subconsciously widened their eyes. As they looked at Qin Yu, they revealed a trace of shock. This shock came from 2 aspects. You are so strong, and yet you aren't at the divine realm? If you break through in the future, wouldn't your strength rise by another level? In comparison, the first point was shocking and enviable. But in today's situation, the second point was more important. You aren't even at the divine realm. So what qualifications do you have to enter the myriad soul Tao? East Zhou Jilly took a deep breath. She suddenly felt as if she had overlooked something. "Qin Yu, you haven't entered the divine realm?" Qin Yu nodded. Her heart sank and she bitterly smiled. "It's true, it's actually true. But you are so strong that you created the God-confining gorge with your own strength. You are an existence that even Shang Lingyue doesn't dare to provoke. But you haven't even broken through to the divine realm. If you didn't say it, who would have thought? We all thought that your aura-concealing abilities were so strong that you deliberately concealed your cultivation. This time, we are in big trouble." East Zhou Jilly looked at Qin Yu, her bitter smile deepening. "Qin Yu, I'm afraid you can't enter the myriad soul Tao with us. Qin Yu frowned, his eyes flashing. Is there a cultivation limit to entering the myriad soul Tao? Shan Lingyue looked deeply at him. The condition to enter the myriad soul Tao is that you must be above the divine realm and below the original divinity realm. There was a trace of doubt in his eyes. With Qin Yu's status, he should know this. But it was obvious that Qin Yu hadn't heard of this before. This was really strange. East Zhou Jieli's heart was even more bitter. She thought that she was confident of entering the myriad soul Tao, but she didn't expect things to be like this. Qin Yu isn't at the divine realm. Could it be that he wants to walk that path, but even if he wants to walk that path, it shouldn't be like this? Qin Yu thought for a moment, then said slowly, if that's the case, I will break through to the divine realm before the myriad soul Tao opens. With his current accumulation, it would be easy for him to knock open the heaven-earth dragon gate and condense the God spirit mark. But obviously others didn't think so. As his voice fell, the surrounding people looked at him with even more strange eyes. Break through to the divine realm? Originally, with Qin Yu's talent, it would be easy for him to do this. They wouldn't doubt it at all. But now, you have accumulated too much before you reach the divine realm. Sometimes accumulating too much might not be a good thing, especially for cultivators who haven't broken through to the divine realm. Chapter 1001. Cultivators who had yet to enter the immortal realm could comprehend the principles of heaven and earth and the power of the principles. Then they could open the great path and condense the God seal to reach the immortal realm. Strictly speaking, each complete principle represented a path to the immortal realm. Obtaining one could prove the immortal realm. Their life level would undergo a transformation, and their strength would rise, granting them a long lifespan. Being able to comprehend 3 or more principles was considered not bad. If one could comprehend 5 or more, they would be considered a genius in the eyes of the world. Of course, the comprehension mentioned here was complete, without the slightest bit of incomplete mastery. Because of the limitation of the soul and cultivation base, comprehending principles before entering the immortal realm was indeed a very difficult task. The world recognized that a cultivator who could control 7 principles before entering the immortal realm had a chance of becoming an original god. Although the Eastern Zhou family could easily gather hundreds of original god realm cultivators, they were scattered in dozens of worlds, big and small. In each world, the number of original God realm cultivators could be counted on one hand. They were already terrifying existences that sat above the 9 heavens. Of course, in this boundless world, there were countless changes. There were always some things that were out of the ordinary. For example, some cultivators were born with amazing soul sensitivity, or they had an extraordinary ability to comprehend the principles of heaven and earth. They could even borrow external forces to comprehend more of the principles of heaven and earth before entering the immortal realm. In this case, they would try to comprehend as many principles of heaven and earth before entering the immortal realm. The reason was simple. The deeper the accumulation before entering the immortal realm, the greater the potential for growth in the future. Everyone understood the principle of accumulation. Strictly speaking, there was nothing wrong with this saying. However, it was a little different when it came to breaking through to the immortal realm. If one were to explain the specific reason as a researcher, it would be a very complicated and professional topic. To sum it up, if a soul that had not yet entered the immortal realm was imprinted with too many principles, it would be like layers of silk threads that would eventually form a cocoon, forming a cage of principles that would become the shackles of one's cultivation. This shackle was for cultivators when they completed their life transformation and reached the immortal realm. Simply speaking, the more principles one comprehended, the stronger the cultivation shackles would be. It was enough to trap a cultivator here forever, and they would never be able to step into the immortal realm again. However, there were too many of them. After countless years and countless cultivators had tried, it was finally determined that there were 10 of them. That's right. Once one grasped more than 10 rules before entering the godly state, they would naturally form an untouchable yet real rule cage. As for Qin, even if no one knew exactly how many laws he had grasped, just based on the matter of the God-confining gorge, one could speculate that there were at least several hundred laws, or even more. It was dozens of times stronger than the bottom line formed by the cage of rules. One could imagine how strong the shackles on his cultivation would be, breaking through to the divine realm. Haha, the hope was so slim that it could be ignored. Beneath the octagonal pavilion, everyone's eyes fell on Qin. No matter what their true emotions were, they all revealed looks of pity. If one didn't enter the immortal realm, one's life level wouldn't be able to advance, and one's soul wouldn't be able to transform. One's future achievements would be limited. Today, Qin strength was tyrannical to the extreme, no weaker than theirs. In fact, he was even stronger. But so what? As time passed, they would continue to advance. In the end, they would rise to a higher level, and the strength of the two sides would no longer be comparable. This was the tragic conclusion reached by countless cultivators who had died from depression over the endless years, using themselves as an example. Shang Lingyue sighed. Fellow Taoist Qin, I don't know what problems have occurred with your body, but before entering the divine realm, there is a taboo in perceiving the rules. This is something that any cultivator with an inheritance should be reminded of. He shook his head, a look of regret on his face. It was as if he could already see Qin bewildered and dispirited back after suffering a heavy blow. But unexpectedly, after hearing all of this, Qin only frowned for a moment before his expression returned to normal. Oh, so that's how it is. What kind of answer was this? In the calmness, there was a hint of understanding. But even more, one could clearly feel his calmness. Did he not know that this meant that in the future his cultivation path had been completely severed? In this life, he would be restricted to the divine realm. When his lifespan came to an end, he would be filled with unwillingness and turned to dust. Facing such a situation, no one could remain calm, right? Or could it be said that Qin had suffered such a great blow that his mind was no longer clear? East Zhou Jili hesitated for a moment. She said in a soft voice, Qin, nothing in this world is set in stone. What others can't do doesn't mean you don't have a chance. He was a direct disciple of the ruler. Even if he hadn't been truly confirmed, with this status he might still have a chance. After all, that was the supreme and omnipotent ruler. But all of this was a matter for the future. The myriad soul Tao was about to open, and Qin was doomed to miss it. And because of this, she would lose the greatest support that she could rely on. Looking into East Zhou Jili's eyes, Qin could clearly feel the helplessness and complexity in her heart. With a thought, he understood why she was like this. His lips curved up in a smile. He said, Miss East Zhou, how long until the myriad soul Tao opens? Every cultivator that obtained a quota and was allowed to enter the myriad soul Tao would establish a faint connection with it. The existence of this connection allowed them to approximate when the myriad soul Tao would open. Once it did, they would be directly pulled in. Strictly speaking, Qin question was a bit presumptuous, but after a moment of hesitation, East Zhou Jili gave him an answer. Within 7 days. Qin said, that's enough. He cupped his hands together. Then I ask Miss East Zhou to arrange a place for me to go into seclusion. I will leave within 7 days. Although he didn't explicitly say it, everyone understood why Qin was in seclusion at this time. He wanted to break through his limits in 7 days and condense a God's spirit mark to reach the divinity realm. Beneath the pavilion, the air fell silent. As everyone looked at Qin, they were stunned for a moment before revealing expressions of absurdity and ridicule. Reach the divinity realm in 7 days? Even if an ordinary cultivator wanted to knock open the dragon gate and condense a God's spirit mark, they would need to make many preparations before doing so. Only then would they have a greater chance of success. Moreover, this was the situation Qin was currently facing. East Zhou Jili's eyes brightened. If she didn't know Qin Yu's true identity, she would naturally find his words laughable. And yet, standing behind him was a supreme sovereign, to turn the rotten into the miraculous, to turn a hopeless situation into a smooth road. Although it was hard to believe, it wasn't impossible. This was because a ruler meant controlling all and subverting all. No problem. In my residence, there is an excellent seclusion chamber. My cultivation won't be disturbed at all. In Qin Yu's eyes, a ruler-level teacher didn't exist at all. In fact, with his current level, he didn't even know that there was such a terrifying existence as a ruler in this world. But he was still confident he could break through the shackles of his cultivation and transform himself, stepping into the divinity realm. It wasn't just because of the jade embryo egg, but also because of the existence of the sun and moon force field. Qin Yu's level of life had already surpassed that of the entire world, and he wasn't restricted by the heavens and earth. Because there were too many law marks in his soul, it caused his cultivation to be shackled. This was a restriction that came from the heavens and earth itself. Thus, to Qin Yu, this wasn't a problem at all. If he wanted to break into the divinity realm, he could do so without too much difficulty. In fact, it was even simpler than an ordinary cultivator's. He had East Zhou Chali send someone to explain the situation to Xiang Shui. Then, without delay, he went into seclusion. Although he didn't feel any pressure about breaking into the divinity realm, this was the first time in his life and he didn't have any experience, so it was best to be a bit more cautious. The myriad soul Dao would open for at most 7 days. He couldn't afford any accidents or setbacks. This time, no matter what, Qin Yu had to enter the myriad soul Dao. With East Zhou Chali's current status in her family, her private training chamber was certainly top quality. At the very least, it was the best room Qin Yu had ever used since he started cultivating. Not only was it large, but the materials used to build it were also incomparably precious. For instance, the floor was paved with an unknown pure white jade that had the effect of calming the mind and enhancing one's ability to sense the rules of the world. It could increase one's cultivation efficiency by at least 10%. Sitting cross-legged on a cushion, Qin Yu rubbed the point between his eyebrows. On the road of cultivation, one had to follow the flow of water. When one grew to a certain limit, they would naturally be able to break into higher realms. But it was better to have someone guiding him. Not only could he avoid taking detours, but there might even be unexpected harvests. As a mysterious cultivator with a great background, someone that even the dignified East Zhou family clan had been stunned by, no matter how willing Qin Yu was, he couldn't ask them for guidance on cultivation. But fortunately, he had a better candidate. He closed his eyes, and with a slight thought, through the powerful contract they had signed, he was able to form a connection with the consciousness far away. In the next moment, Qin Yu's consciousness was pulled into the world of his mind. A towering stone pagoda appeared in front of him, towering like the clouds. The pagoda was pure white like jade and emitted endless light. You want to break into the divinity realm? Now. Before Qin Yu could speak, the stone pagoda seemed to know everything. Thoughts fluctuated in response, as if it was mocking him. Qin Yu looked up at the towering stone pagoda and calmly said, "That's right." These two simple words were calm but firm. The stone pagoda fell silent. It wasn't shaken by Qin Yu's firm words, but was digesting the fact that it had encountered such a stupid master. And most importantly, this master wasn't something it had chosen. Rather, it was a choice it had no choice but to make in the face of a life or death threat. After all, it was the lesser of two evils. "Are you an idiot?" The stone pagoda roared and jumped up from the ground. The tip of the pagoda drooped down like a person bending over. It stared straight at Qin Yu. "I don't care why you are doing this. If you make a breakthrough to the divine realm now, you will regret it in the future." Qin Yu lightly said, "Then regret it." "I absolutely will not agree." "You can disagree, because I'm not asking for your opinion on this matter." Qin Yu narrowed his eyes. "Perhaps you have already forgotten your current status Everything I say. Just do as I say. Bang! The earth violently shook. In the world of his mind, between the deep blue skies, massive black clouds gushed out and strong winds howled. Qin Yu lifted a hand and pointed a finger forward. All of this instantly vanished from sight, as if the entire world had been paused. I don't want to repeat myself a second time, understand? The stone pagoda rapidly shrank. In the blink of an eye, it was only the size of a knuckle and was grasped in his palm. Chapter 1002. There is no such thing as an airtight wall in this world. Even if the powerful Eastern Zhou family managed their base airtight, it was impossible to completely isolate them from the outside world. In particular, as the Myriad Soul Dao was about to open, news related to Qin Yu was listed as the highest priority. In just several days, the Eastern Zhou family had secretly dealt with over a dozen cultivators. Several of them had even been regarded as trusted aides of the family for many years. In order to place these spies in, not only did it require long-term planning and careful arrangements, but it also required luck. Every one of them could be said to be incomparably precious. Now that they had been activated without hesitation, it could be seen just how much they valued Qin Yu. After paying such a heavy price, it was naturally impossible for the Eastern Zhou family to completely block off news related to Qin Yu. Thus, news that his cultivation had yet to reach the deity realm was spread out in the shortest possible time. The hidden waves came to an abrupt stop. All plans involving Qin Yu were terminated, and all parties withdrew their tentacles to probe the Eastern Zhou family. As for the news that Qin Yu had gone into seclusion at Eastern Zhou Chali's residence, and that he would leave within 7 days, no one believed this. They certainly knew of the existence of the Cage of Laws. They also knew that with Qin Yu's current condition, let alone 7 days, even if he was given 1,000 years or 10,000 years, he would still have no hope of breaking through. He would forever be trapped in the deity realm. Such a Qin Yu would still be formidable, but to all parties, there was no longer any need to win him over. The gathered attention quickly retreated. Since he had no value, they couldn't clash with the Eastern Zhou family because of him. Eastern Zhou Chali received a notice from the Council of Elders, requesting that she select a new follower from the list of candidates to replace Qin Yu as soon as possible. As for the contract she had signed with Qin Yu, she couldn't even enter the Myriad Soul Dao, so she could only give up. Chali, don't have any more delusions. Qin Yu's status is indeed noble, but his value as an investment has fallen to the lowest. Although I don't know how he reached this step, even if he is the disciple of a ruler, I fear he will never be recognized. Sitting opposite her was an elder who had a close relationship with Eastern Zhou Chali's late father. The Myriad Soul Path is about to open. You don't have much time left. You can't waste any more time. He took out a jade slip and placed it on the table. Inside this is a list of cultivators to choose from. It is best if you give the Council of Elders your answer tomorrow. We will do our best to respect your choice. But you also know that the position of a follower not only concerns your own interests, but also the internal game within the family. So, I can't guarantee the final result for now. Uncle. Jelly of Dongzhou hesitated. The family elder across from her frowned and glanced at her. His thoughts raced, and it was unknown what he was thinking. His expression grew even grimmer. Jiali, the Myriad Soul Dao concerns your future. You can't take any risks. I don't care what sort of relationship exists between you and Qin Yu. He has already lost the chance to enter the Myriad Soul Dao. You should be well aware of this. Stop dreaming and give me the name list by tomorrow. Do you hear me? East Zhou Chali took a deep breath, stood up and bowed. Yes, clan uncle. When the family elder left, she turned and looked towards where Qin Yu was in seclusion. She bitterly smiled. Qin Yu, if you really can break into the divine realm, then do it as soon as possible. Seclusion chamber. Qin Yu sat down cross-legged. An aura lingered around him, shaking and yet blurry. It was boundless and heavy, and there was a faint, suppressive feeling about it. He had encountered trouble. The cage of laws hadn't been able to bring Chinyu any trouble. Wrapped within the sun-moon force field, he was a transcendent existence. The problem occurred when he made a breakthrough in his cultivation and condensed a god spirit mark. Originally, when a cultivator knocked open the dragon gate of heaven and earth and perceived the great Tao rules, they would naturally weave together. Underneath the influence of a mysterious strength, they would condense a complete divine mark and step into the divine realm. But the number of great Tao rules Chinyu used to condense his god spirit mark seemed to be a bit too much. Or, it could be said that the mysterious strength that descended was too little, not enough to support the complete condensation of the world rules. As a result, his cultivation was stuck at the threshold between the divine realm and the divine realm. He had broken through his limits and completed the transformation of life. He had indeed reached the divine realm, but he hadn't been able to smoothly condense a divine mark. Thus, he couldn't obtain a normal fusion with the world. If he couldn't fuse, he would naturally be rejected. This was the reason why Chinyu was shrouded in that obscure and heavy aura. Moreover, what caused Chinyu to bitterly smile was that, as time passed, this repulsive strength continued to strengthen. According to this speed, even if his mortal body was tyrannical enough, he still wouldn't be able to last much longer. At that time, he feared he would be crushed to pieces. He had broken into the divine realm, but still couldn't condense a god spirit mark. Because of this, he would be rejected by the world and crushed to death. If he really ended up like this, Chinyu felt that he would definitely be chosen as one of the 10 most tragic deaths in the cultivation world. So, this sort of unbearably tragic result was absolutely unacceptable. Is this what you meant when you said, "I broke into the divine realm too early"? Now I can't even smoothly condense a god spirit mark. If I wait any longer and perceive more rules, it will only be more difficult than it is now. Within the world of his mind, Chinyu looked straight at the stone pagoda in front of him. As he spoke, his complexion was incomparably ugly. Currently, this stone pagoda was only 4 or 5 meters tall. It was still crystal clear and emitted a dazzling light, but it didn't have its previous aura. Vaguely, one could feel a trace of awkwardness coming from it. This world seemed to have changed a little from the past. In the past, when cultivators broke into the divine realm, there wasn't such trouble. Facing Chinyu's question, it thought for a moment and decided that the words "silence is golden" were very reasonable. But soon his next words caused the stone pagoda to change its mind. "You can remain silent now, but if I am unlucky, you won't be any better off. We are all grasshoppers on the same rope. If we die together." Chinyu was the master of the stone pagoda. He had the right to choose whether or not to destroy the stone pagoda with him. This was something that the stone pagoda was well aware of. "I don't fear hardship or suffering. I only cannot accept death." Using these words to describe the stone pagoda was the most appropriate. So, as it heard the word death from Chinyu's mouth, it immediately lost its composure. "My glorious life as a pagoda has just begun. How can I accompany a brat like this and die like this? I can't remain silent any longer." Cough. In truth, with the current situation, it isn't that there is no other way. Chapter 1003. If the stone pagoda said it had a way, then it certainly had a way. In the current situation, it didn't dare to make fun of Chinyu again. "Speak." Chinyu's response was simple and direct. The stone pagoda was silent for a moment. Then it said, "As you can sense, when a cultivator breaks through the limit and steps into the divine realm, the rules of the world they control will begin to weave together under the influence of a mysterious strength, condensing into a divine spirit mark." I think you know the important point. I don't have time to listen to your long speech right now. The important point is that a long time ago, there were some people who were extremely confident in themselves. They weren't willing to completely hand over the condensation of a divine spirit mark to an unknown strength, so they chose to do it themselves. If the stone pagoda could condense a face, it would definitely be smirking right now. Its cold and lofty expression would also reveal a bit of disdain. Of course, with your boundary, you probably don't know that the quality of a divine spirit mark is directly related to the strength you can obtain after stepping into the divine realm. Because of this divine mark, you can even obtain some incomparably wonderful lucky chances between the heavens and earth. Let me remind you one last time. The important point: the stone pagoda swore that if it had a chance in the future, it would definitely push Chinyu into the ground and rub him against it 10,000 times. This fellow, didn't he know that when others were showing off, being a qualified spectator was the most basic quality of a person? Just wait. I believe that this day will eventually come. But for now, I'll endure it. Because of certain reasons, I happen to know of a method that can condense a divine spirit mark. The stone pagoda straightforwardly said, but I must remind you that a divine spirit mark isn't as simple as weaving together the law marks and forming some sort of high and mighty shape. It is a mark that is compatible with the heavens and earth, one that obtains the recognition of the heavens and earth. It is an extremely complex mark. The slightest mistake or deviation will cripple the divine seal. If you really reach this step, even if you break through to the divine realm, it will be the worst kind. Basically, in the future, you can no longer hope to improve your cultivation. So, there is a method, but you had best consider it carefully. If there is a problem, don't blame me for not warning you. Chinyu frowned for a moment before composing himself. This process probably took less than a breath of time. Give me the method to condense the divine mark. It wasn't that he was so impulsive that he didn't think about something as important as condensing the God spirit mark. But in the current situation, he had already thought of all aspects, and there was no other way at all. Since there was no other way, even if he knew that there was a risk and that he would be crippled, he could only brace himself and continue. This was because if he crippled himself, he would at least be able to continue living, and as long as he was alive, there would be countless possibilities in this world. Death was the greatest horror that could end everything. To tell the truth, although he looked down on Chinyu's cultivation and was extremely disgusted by Chinyu's refusal to cooperate with him, Shurta had to admit that Chinyu's decisiveness was very admirable. If it had been anyone else, even if they knew that this was the only way to break the seal, they would have hesitated for a long time since it involved their future. With Chinyu as an example, the stone pagoda had encountered some people with this sort of temperament before, and they had all been doing fairly well. Perhaps this master that it had no choice but to acknowledge wasn't as bad as it had imagined. It could still have a little hope for the future. Of course, these thoughts remained in its heart. The stone pagoda absolutely wouldn't reveal any of them. This brat Chinyu, he didn't give it any face at all. If he knew that it appreciated him just a little bit more, wouldn't he turn the heavens upside down? Haha, I absolutely can't give him this chance. Since you want the method to condense a divine seal, then I will give it to you. As for the result, that will depend on your own luck. After all, there had never been two identical divine seals in this world. The process of condensing one could only depend on Chinyu himself. No one could interfere. A warm current poured into his mind. With a light hum in his ears, it immediately exploded, turning into a massive amount of information that was branded into his soul. Chinyu closed his eyes, carefully perceiving the method of condensing a divine seal that he received from the stone pagoda. After a long time, he let out a long breath. So it could also be like this. He really couldn't imagine just what sort of amazing character could think of this method in the past. To actually act on behalf of the heavens and earth, to control a mysterious strength for one's own use, to condense one's own will into a divine spirit seal that could be born. Of course, one could also understand this. Just what sort of arrogant and confident fellow would dare to do such a thing? After all, a single wrong step would lead to an endless abyss. This was simply madness. And now, Chinyu was about to become one of these crazy fellows. He carefully deliberated and determined that he had completely grasped the method of condensing a divine seal. There wasn't the slightest bit of ambiguity. Chinyu took a deep breath. With a thought, The law marks that wove together in his soul and hadn't been able to smoothly condense began to tremble. This sort of vibration originated from his soul and spread outwards. Finally, it triggered the repulsive pressure of the world outside his body, forming some sort of resonance with it. Perhaps this was proof of the saying that out of the 50 paths of the great Tao, only one could escape. Even in a hopeless situation, the world was still willing to give one a slim chance of survival. This was because after the repulsive and crushing strength of the world resonated with the trembling of the rules, its own fluctuations began to mobilize the mysterious strength that descended from the dark. Through the trembling of one's own law marks, one could cause the repulsive strength of the world to resonate and mobilize the mysterious strength in the dark. Finally, the law marks wove together. Just by repeating this process once, one could feel how complex it was. In reality, the difficulty could be imagined. To condense a perfect divine spirit mark that met one's own requirements in this state was nearly impossible. Endless years ago, most cultivators that tried to take this step had ruined themselves, causing them to shed tears of regret. Even if there were 1 or 2 that succeeded, it was negligible when compared to the base number. It was because of this that this crazy cultivation method gradually disappeared from the world, losing its own inheritance. But now, since he had reached this step, there was no need to think about it any further. Qin Yu poured all of his mind into the trembling of the law marks. Little by little, he tried to push the mysterious strength to revolve. As for what sort of divine spark he wanted to condense, in truth, he had no idea. But in the method of condensing a divine seal, there was a sentence mentioned. Everyone is different, and the path of blending in with the heavens and earth is also different. Follow your heart, and you can find yourself. The general meaning was that everyone was different, and condensing a divine seal was also different. As long as he followed his feelings, he could obtain a divine spark that suited him. Of course, the premise was that he had to walk the right path. If he turned into a fork or slipped and fell into a ditch, then that would be embarrassing. But after Qin Yu waited for a long time, he discovered a serious problem. Why hadn't his feelings appeared yet? If he didn't feel anything, then it was tasteless. It was like asking if water was bitter or spicy. This he didn't know. What should he do? That damned stone pagoda. Was it deliberately trying to trick him? No, this matter didn't have any advantages for it. If Qin Yu was unlucky, it couldn't hide on the side and watch the fun either. There was a high chance that its fate would be even more miserable than Qin Yu's. Then why? Qin Yu wanted to know the reason. But what the reason wasn't the most important matter right now. If he couldn't follow his feelings, then he could only rely on his intuition. If this was true, then the divine spirit mark he finally formed would surely be extremely touching. His mouth tasted a bit bitter, but the arrow was already nocked. It had to be released. Qin Yu took a deep breath. His thoughts stirred, and the law marks in his soul slowly moved. Bang! There was a loud explosion in his mind. This feeling was even more terrifying than 10 thunderclaps exploding in his ears. Qin Yu felt his consciousness fly away. Then, in the next moment, he fell into darkness. His consciousness collapsed, and he lost control of the strength within his body. Once the process of condensing the divine spirit mark was stopped, he would suffer a backlash from the world. To violate the might of the heavens and earth and attempt to use one's will to direct the condensation of the divine spirit mark. It would be fine if he succeeded, but if he failed, he would inevitably pay a heavy price. The consequences were something that even the current Qin Yu couldn't withstand. But this terrifying situation didn't occur. This was because after Qin Yu's consciousness fell into darkness, the law marks in his soul space were suddenly wrapped up by an invisible strength and began to weave at an astonishing speed. The outline of a god, spirit, mark gradually appeared. Its complexity was beyond imagination. When one looked at it, they immediately felt a swelling pain in their heads, as if they were being torn apart. This god spirit mark that had yet to condense actually possessed some kind of extremely terrifying power. In the next moment, all around Qinyu, the repulsive strength of the world that was resonating with the law marks began to violently tumble about. It was like a giant grinding stone that wanted to pull him in and grind him into powder. It was like the world itself, after sensing this aura, didn't allow this divine mark to truly descend into the world. Bang! There was a heaven-shaking explosion. It was like towering mountains colliding with each other as they moved at high speeds. A strength broke out from Qin Yu's body. It resisted the crushing strength of the world and actually didn't fall behind at all. But it couldn't be forgotten that this strength was also helping Qin Yu condense the divine spirit mark. From this, one could infer that it could easily deal with the crushing strength of the world. From this, one could imagine just how powerful it was, resisting the crushing strength of the world on the outside and condensing the divine spirit mark on the inside. But this divine spirit mark was far too complex. It was so complex that even the number of law marks in Qin Yu's soul wasn't enough to support its condensation. What if there wasn't enough? The best and most direct method was to make up for the gap. The strength that led the divine spirit mark to condense paused for a moment. Then, a loud explosion erupted from Qin Yu's body. It was like a great beast that had been slumbering for countless years, was slowly awakening with a loud roar. The crushing strength of the world outside suddenly came to a standstill. Then it exploded into pieces. In the next moment, the shredded strength of the world howled into Qin Yu's body. His body was like an endless abyss that could swallow all as it was sucked into his body. Eastern Zhou Chali's private training chamber was indeed of an extremely high standard. But in front of this strength, it was as fragile as an eggshell. With just a light touch, it shattered into countless pieces. Thus, the entire Eastern Zhou family station was alarmed. Countless cultivators looked up in amazement at Qin Yu's seclusion chamber. In their senses, they could clearly hear the pained wails of the world itself. It was like an incomparably delicate little girl being pressed into a pile of hay by a thick and sturdy man and then ravaged again and again. The higher one's cultivation was, the clearer their senses became. Their complexions became increasingly solemn and their eyes filled with endless horror. Because at this moment, someone was plundering the world, forcefully taking the world's rules and fusing them into their own body. There are countless laws in the world and countless great Daos. They existed here, evolved from the world itself. They could be perceived, they could be controlled, and they could also be plundered. But the premise was that you had enough strength to ensure that you could do this. Moreover, you wouldn't die to the backlash of the world's will. Originally, this was something that only existed in legends. But today, it was finally confirmed that there were truly such fierce and ferocious characters in this world. The place where this occurred was Eastern Zhou Chali's residence. After a brief search, they discovered that the one who caused this commotion was Qin Yu, who was in seclusion. The entire Eastern Zhou family was shaken. Someone had even directly taken action to plunder the world's rules. Was it really that difficult to break through the cage of rules and condense a god's spirit mark? Compared to this wasn't anything at all. Could it be that this was Qin Yu's mysterious master, whose origin he still didn't know? Ruler, perhaps only this sort of transcendent existence that stood above the myriad worlds and could even replace a portion of the world itself could possess such terrifying abilities. Their judgment was clearly wrong. Qin Yu was absolutely not a crippled disciple of a ruler who would find it difficult to rise up in the future. On the contrary, if an unparalleled ruler could personally help him break into the divine realm, then he must be the most favored and favored successor. Such a Qin Yu's status and value would rise by more than 100 times over. But what left the Eastern Zhou family depressed was that the disturbance Qin Yu caused today was far, far too great. It was so great that they couldn't conceal it no matter what. In other words, today's events would soon spread to all sides, plundering the world for his own use and smoothly breaking into the divine realm. Even if his status as a ruler's disciple wasn't known, the current Qin Yu would still incite a mad scramble for him. Chali, You and Qin, you are old friends. No matter what price you must pay, you must keep him in the family. You absolutely cannot lose him." The family elder who had warned Eastern Zhou Chali to quickly choose a candidate to follow had a completely different attitude now. He hesitated for a moment and then said with a deep look in his eyes, "Although it is a bit inappropriate for me to say these words, if there are any feelings between you and Qinyu, you must grasp them well. If you can walk together with him, that will be the greatest lucky chance of your life. Even the entire Eastern Zhou family will benefit from it." Chapter 1004. Eastern Zhou. Jelly revealed a trace of embarrassment. She helplessly said, "Elder, you are overthinking things. Although Qinyu and I are old acquaintances, the most appropriate word to describe our relationship is cooperation. There is nothing else involved." The family elder smiled. He said in a soft voice, "Jolly, you are confused by the situation. With Qinyu's status, there are countless ways he could have entered the myriad soul Dao. So why would he go through so much trouble to chase you here and willingly become your follower?" Eastern Zhou Jolly's heart skipped a beat. Although she still felt that the elder's words weren't too likely, a faint blush crept onto her face. This was because there seemed to be some truth in his words. Could Qin-yu really have feelings for her? Qin-yu's figure appeared in her mind, and she suddenly felt a bit panicked. She took a deep breath and suppressed her chaotic thoughts. "Elder, please rest assured that no matter what, I will do my best to keep Qin-yu here." "That's good. If you need support from the family, you can directly report it. The Eastern Zhou family will give you the greatest degree of authority." The family elder had a dignified expression. "You must know that Qinyu is the strongest strength you can borrow right now. If you can be on good terms with him and support him, it will be infinitely beneficial to you in the future." Without staying for long, the family elder hurriedly left. The Eastern Zhou family had already anticipated the coming storm. Even if they had absolute confidence in their own strength, they still had to be vigilant in order to prevent any accidents from occurring and others taking advantage of them. As East Zhou Chali was feeling shy and embarrassed, thinking about whether or not she should try to use her beauty to seduce Qinyu, news of Qinyu's breakthrough to the divine realm was rapidly spreading out. After confirming the authenticity of this news, Qinyu, who had lost all value in winning him over, became the focus of attention once more, plundering the heavens and earth for his own use. Although no one knew what happened when Qinyu broke into the divine realm, just this point alone was enough to fill everyone with confidence in him. The cage of rules couldn't trap him. His breakthrough into the divine realm was already a done deal. Such a Qinyu was even more mysterious and unfathomable, as if he were hidden in layers of fog. He made one instinctively feel awe. That's right, it was awe. Plundering the heavens and earth and taking its strength for one's own. Just what boundary was needed to accomplish this? Although no one had a clear understanding of it, they could roughly guess what it was. It seemed that the teacher behind Qinyu, the one who was said to have transcended the heavens, perhaps his strength truly transcended the heavens. Of course, no one believed that Qinyu had caused such a ruckus today by himself. There was only one possibility, and that was that the towering mountain behind him had taken action. For such a transcendent existence to act and seize the good fortune of the heavens and earth, how could Qinyu's status be ordinary? He must be highly regarded. Putting aside the matter of the myriad soul path, just the special status that Qinyu had revealed was enough to cause all parties to take action and compete for his friendship. After all, none of them were stupid. If they could get close to Qinyu, they would naturally be able to form a connection with the mountain behind him. Just this point alone was enough for them to take some risks and wrestle with the Dongzhou clan. After all the powers that were qualified to enter the myriad soul path possessed some sort of background. It was said that the current fourth miss of the Dongzhou clan was a true beauty. It was said that Eastern Zhou Jolly was an old acquaintance of Qinyu. It was said that the two of them had a close relationship and their actions were intimate. As the saying went, know yourself and know your enemy, and you would never be defeated in 100 battles. To be able to rise from the boundless heavens and become a powerful influence, they certainly wouldn't lack wisdom and caution. Since they had decided to compete with the Dongzhou clan for Qinyu, they had to find the key to this matter. Only then would they be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort. And now, as more and more information was gathered, all parties came to the same conclusion. The reason that Qinyu had gone to the Dongzhou clan was because of Dongzhou Jolly. It would be a lie to say that they weren't envious. After all, the Dongzhou clan hadn't done anything at all. All they had done was raise such an outstanding girl, and they were the first to enjoy the benefits of being close to Qinyu. In the future, they might even obtain greater benefits. But fortunately, we are also a wealthy family, and we also have many outstanding daughters. It's not as if we don't have a chance. But what excuse could they use to approach Qinyu so that he wouldn't loathe them? And how could they tear apart the obstruction of the Dongzhou clan? Flies could always find a crack on the surface of an egg, no matter how small it was. Of course, strictly speaking, this description wasn't too appropriate, but it was enough to express one's meaning. As long as one wanted to find someone, there would always be a reason. For instance, within the Dongzhou clan, an elder was about to hold a 3,000-year-old birthday celebration. Although living for 3,000 years wasn't much in the cultivation world, for better or worse, one was still one of the Dongzhou clan's elders, so they had the qualifications to celebrate. As for us, we have always maintained a friendly relationship with the Dongzhou clan. Since we know of this matter, it is only reasonable that we come to congratulate them. Only then can we not be disrespectful. We have come on our own initiative to offer our blessings, and we have all sorts of etiquettes. No matter how unwilling your Dongzhou clan is, you can't just drive us away, right? Of course, this was only an elder's 3,000th birthday celebration. It wasn't enough for the leaders of the various families to personally attend. Thus, it would be more appropriate to send some outstanding juniors from the family. Thus, an unknown Dongzhou clan elder soon received countless birthday jade slips with a dumbfounded expression. Each of the youths on this list had a great background. If this were any other time, receiving these birthday jade slips would be a matter of great honor, enough for him to brag about for hundreds of years. But now, even if he thought with his knees, he could tell that these cultivators from all over who had come in the name of offering their blessings all had ill intentions. Otherwise, why would there be so many famous young and beautiful cultivators on this list? What the F***CK? His intentions were beyond reprehensible. The Eastern Zhou family elder who wanted to cry but had no tears immediately found himself in a difficult situation. He had never imagined that he would be used by others to create trouble. This was especially true when he felt the dissatisfied gazes of the Council of Elders. He felt even more uneasy. He thought to himself, I am just a newly promoted little elder with no influence. If I offend the great figures here today, my future will surely be miserable. But I have already sent a letter saying that the birthday celebration has been cancelled, but they haven't replied at all. It is clear that they are pretending to be ignorant, so what can I do? I am also helpless. The Dongzhou clan patriarch had no expression. Since they are so enthusiastic, my Dongzhou clan naturally cannot be disrespectful. If they want to come, then come. After all, excuses are things that can be found as long as one wants to. In the end, it is impossible to avoid them. He had already left seclusion. Although he had only disappeared for a short few days, the feeling he gave off had greatly changed. Before, that omnipresent oppressive aura that lingered around him had now vanished. All that was left was a calm and unruffled air. Standing in front of them, he seemed far away. His aura was erratic and impossible to grasp. Everyone knew that the patriarch must have obtained some harvests during his seclusion. Even if he didn't make a breakthrough on the spot, his cultivation bottleneck had loosened. Like this, as long as he was given enough time, he had a high chance of breaking through his current cultivation and stepping into the strongest realm below, the ruler realm. And this was because Qin Yu's arrival had brought benefits to the Dongzhou clan. As long as they maintained good relations with him, there would inevitably be more benefits in the future. How could such a Qin be stolen away by others? Humph, humph. What does a beautiful woman count for? Can my Dongzhou clan not produce one? None of you can even think of pulling Qinyu away from the embrace of the Dongzhou clan.